Next, election night in America. The races to watch as contentious primaries put an ex-president's power to the test. Plus, a North Carolina congressman fights to keep his job. Join CNN for live coverage next.
Polls have just closed in portions of Kentucky, part of a primary night almost certain to make headlines, especially here in Pennsylvania, where the Democratic Senate primary is dominated by a last-minute health crisis, and the Republican Senate primary is at the center of a political free-for-all, and that's not all. CNN's John King is joining us right now with a closer look at what's in store tonight. Lots at stake. John, update our viewers what you're looking at.
Well, certainly, let's just start by setting the table. You're in Pennsylvania. Look at this map of the Senate races up this year. Blue states held by Democratic incumbents. Red states have Republican incumbents. Obviously, a 50-50 Senate. So control of the Senate is a huge prize in this midterm year. And when Democrats look at this map, that Republican-held seat where you are in Pennsylvania is their one possible target. Now, Democrats say we'll compete in Ohio, we'll compete in North Carolina, but when they dig deep down, they think that is their best target, which is why that race is so important. So we'll wait to get the nominees tonight. You mentioned the three-way free-for-all on the Republican side. Donald Trump has endorsed TV doctor Mehmet Oz. Dave McCormick's a former hedge fund manager, more of a typical Republican, if you will. A lot of former Trump aides work for him. Kathy Barnett is the surprise conservative surging candidate at the end of the race. The question is, can she win? So what to look for? When the polls close, we'll look down here. Philadelphia and the collar counties around it, Montgomery County, Chester County, Delaware County, Bucks County. That's about 30% of the state population right here. And there are a lot of Republicans who live in those suburbs. How do they vote? Do they break for one candidate? And then out here in what Pennsylvanians call the T, this is conservative country. It's all gray right now because we have no votes yet, but let's just go back in time, Wolf. This is where Donald Trump runs it up. In Pennsylvania, in the rural counties. Does that endorsement for Dr. Oz make a difference? Do Trump voters support Dr. Oz? Or does Kathy Barnett, who campaigns saying she's actually the true Trumpism carrier of the race, does she win out here? So when we count the votes, watch Philadelphia, watch the suburbs, and then watch this giant swath of rural counties and see if one candidate can break out.
And we, of course, will be checking in with you throughout this night, a very important night. There's also attention on other states tonight, John, as you know, including North Carolina, where the fate of the embattled Congressman Madison Cawthorn hangs in the balance. What more can you tell us about that?
Let's pull up the state of North Carolina. Let me turn this off so I can pop it out here. Madison Cawthorn has been involved in scandal after scandal, controversy after controversy since taking office. Twice, TSA stopped him carrying a gun into an airport. He was driving with a suspended license. He angered the Republican leadership, Wolf, as you recall, by saying he had been invited by members of the leadership to orgies where cocaine was being used. He has since backed away from that, but the Republican establishment has broken from him. This is his district, the 11th congressional district in the southwestern corner. It's a Republican district. If Madison Cawthorn wins the primary, he's likely to go on to win re-election. If anyone else can beat him in the primary, likely to go on to win re-election. But this is a battle where Trump came in at the last minute, said give Madison Cawthorn a second chance. Both of the state's Republican senators, the House Republican leader says, please, Republicans, nominate somebody else. So we'll count the votes here. Asheville and the areas to the west a bit later tonight.
All right, John King reporting for us. John, we'll be in touch, obviously, throughout the night. Thank you very, very much. Let's get some more now on the key race we're about to get resolved. CNN's Jeff Zeleny is in Pennsylvania for us, not too far away from where I am. Jeff, as we heard from John, a very tight three-person GOP Senate race here in Pennsylvania tonight. What more can you tell us on the energy within the Oz, Barnett, and McCormick campaigns?
Well, it is surprisingly tight and uncomfortably tight for Dr. Mehmet Oz and David McCormick. That is all because of the energy from Kathy Barnett, really developed over the last several days here. While both campaigns were busy attacking one another, she essentially came up the middle through her hard arguments and complaints and charges that the election in 2020 was stolen for President Donald Trump. Of course, that is not true, but those unfounded claims really have propelled her candidacy. Now, this is something that if you talk to campaign officials from the Oz campaign and the McCormick campaign, they overlooked and underestimated her. And now they say she would be a risk to the Republican Party should she become the nominee this evening. She pushes back on that, and she says, look, she is a authentic Republican. She's a different kind of Republican, never run for public office except in 2020 when she was defeated by nearly 20 percentage points here in the Philadelphia suburbs. But Wolf, she's also pushed back on that, saying that Donald Trump lost the district by 26 points. She outperformed him. So we will see how it works this evening. But in the final 90 minutes or so of voting, it is the undecided voters at the end of this race that, of course, will make the difference. Did Kathy Barnett convince enough of them to come to her, or were the negative onslaught of ads against her by the Oz and McCormick campaigns enough to raise doubt about her? Those are the dynamics here as we head into the final, again, hour and a half of voting, Wolf.
Yeah, so much at stake tonight. On the Democratic side of the Senate race here in Pennsylvania, what more are you learning, Jeff, about the condition of the Lieutenant Governor, John Fetterman? As you know, most of our viewers, I'm sure, know, he was hospitalized earlier this week after suffering what he called to be a minor stroke.
Wolf has been in the hospital since Friday, actually, and will not be at his campaign rally. That is because he spent much of the afternoon in surgery, getting a device inserted inside him, a defibrillator. So the stroke, more serious than it initially seemed. His doctors and his campaign said he eventually will recover, but he will not be on hand for the race. That does not necessarily change the race. Democrats believe that he is likely to become the nominee this evening, but he's running in a race with two other people as well, so we'll let those votes be counted. But a very unusual circumstance for a leading candidate to be hospitalized and not at his election headquarters, Wolf.
Yeah, we'll see what happens tonight. Thanks very much, Jeff Zeleny, on the scene for us, as he always is. Coming up, the focus on North Carolina Republican Senate primary, especially after former President Trump spoke out about the candidates he's backing, the embattled Congressman Madison Cawthorn. I'll talk it over with our political experts. That's coming up next. We'll be right back. We're now waiting for results in primary races in 5 states. Polls already closed now in portions of Kentucky. I want to bring in our political team on this very big night. Joining us now, CNN's chief political analyst, Gloria Borger, CNN's senior political commentator, former senior advisor to President Obama, David Axelrod, and CNN national affairs analyst, Casey Hunt, who's with me here in Philadelphia. Gloria, let's start with you. The effects of tonight's primaries certainly could be far-reaching indeed. What are you watching?
Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania. I think it's hugely important when you consider control of the Senate, when you take a look at the Republican Party and you see the way it's going to behave post-Donald Trump, and also when you look at that race for governor. If you have this conservative Mastriano running and winning, he gets to appoint the Secretary of State in the state of Pennsylvania. He has been an ardent election denier, and that's going to be a hugely important role in 2024. So in every way, it's Pennsylvania.
You're absolutely right. Among Republicans, David, is this a race to out-Trump Trump?
Well, you know, it's interesting, Wolf. What you have in the Senate race are in the view of some of the hard MAGA voters, you have one MAGA candidate and 2 counterfeit MAGAs. And the 2 counterfeit MAGAs are the ones who've spent $40 million beating the hell out of each other, each trying to certify their own acceptance to Trump and Trumpism. And the MAGA voters, or at least the far right of MAGA, is saying, no, we don't believe you. She's the real deal. We're going to be with her. And she's twinned up with that governor's candidate, Mastriano, in Pennsylvania. And the two of them are threatening to take Pennsylvania pretty far to the right here, to the delight, I think, of some Democrats. We'll see if they say that in November. But one point on this, Wolf, the Democratic candidate for governor spent over $2 million on advertising, attacking Mastriano in the governor's race on the Republican side for being too Trump. And the clear objective was to make him a stronger candidate in that Republican primary. He wants to run against him. He may get his wish tonight.
Let's see if he does. You know, Casey, you're here with me in Philadelphia. You're going to be in Philadelphia with me throughout this important night. You know this state well. You're from here, from this area. You know Pennsylvania well. You know the stakes. I know you had a chance recently to profile the Democratic Senate candidate, John Fetterman. You know, he's doing well right now. What can you tell us about him?
Well, he's had a little bit of a health scare here at the last minute. He's in the hospital having a pacemaker and defibrillator put in, won't be at his own election night party, but he really has consolidated Democrats behind him. A lot of Democrats in Washington thought that voters would get behind Connor Lamb, who is a Marine Corps vet, somebody who won a pro-Trump district out in the western part of Pennsylvania, but he really didn't catch on. And instead, many Democratic voters seem to be, we're seeing this regardless of political ideology. They're looking for candidates who aren't necessarily part of the traditional mold, people who seem like they're coming across as, the word I heard over and over again when I was talking to voters in Pennsylvania, was real. John Fetterman is, I mean, he's a big guy. You can't escape his physical presence when you're campaigning with him. He wears, cargo shorts, gym shorts, and hoodies when he campaigns. And he really has made a concerted effort to try to win over some of those blue-collar voters. They were traditionally Union Democrats, and then they were won by Donald Trump, especially in the western part of the state. So he hasn't shied away from trying to attract those voters back to the Democratic Party. So I think that's what's going to be interesting to watch about him as we approach the fall. I think one challenge he's going to have is energizing particularly black voters in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. He's going to have some work to do there. But it does seem like, at least tonight, unless there's a major surprise, he's on track to be the Democratic nominee for Senate.
I know. We wish him only a speedy recovery from a stroke the other day. Let's hope for the best for that. Casey, don't go too far away. Gloria, how much does former President Donald Trump have at stake tonight, especially here in Pennsylvania?
Well, he has a lot because he's been talking about it nonstop. And what he wants to do is just put check marks next to victories to show that that is his strength and that he is still all-powerful, kingmaker, puppet master, whatever you want to call it, within the Republican Party. He's nervous tonight because his chosen candidate, Dr. Oz, whom he often describes as a TV star who was on TV for 13 seasons and therefore must have an awful lot of appeal to voters, particularly women, is suffering even after millions and millions of dollars have been poured into his campaign. So I think it would be a major embarrassment for Donald Trump if Oz lost, particularly if he lost to Kathy Barnett, who is more Trump than Trump, and who has come out and said, we were here first. Donald Trump, you were the one who climbed onto our movement, not the other way around. And so this movement is about us, and she's clearly making the case that, yeah, we'd like to have you, but you're not the boss of me anymore, as my kids would say. We don't need you. We're moving on.
Very interesting. David, as you know well, Democrats going into the midterm elections this year are up against very strong headwinds. J.P. Morgan, for example, just today indicating that the average price of a gallon of gas could hit $6 by August, not just out in California, but all across the country. How would that play going into November?
I assume that's a rhetorical question, Wolf. Obviously, it wouldn't play well, and there are very strong winds facing Democrats. That's why these elections are going to be watched so closely, because Republicans think they could have a chance to hang on to this Senate seat in Pennsylvania, but they fear that if they nominate the wrong candidate, they won't be able to hold on to that seat. And so, yes, I think that everything, if you were a doctor and you looked at the checklist of vital signs, they're all rather negative for Democrats right now. What they're hoping for is that Republicans will save Democrats by nominating candidates who are more beatable in November and that they can withstand the headwinds that they're sure to be facing.
Gloria, is it clear to you how much of an impact the draft U.S. Supreme Court opinion overturning Roe v. Wade could have on these races tonight and in other states in the weeks and months ahead?
Look, I think it's way too early to tell about the impact on the election. I believe that it's going to have a large impact if the ruling is as we think in the 2024 election, because people are going to have to start dealing with the consequences of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Who do you arrest? The doctor, the woman? What? But tonight, I think, Kathy Barnett is pro-life. So are the Republican candidates. So I don't think on that side it's going to have that huge an impact. But I think in the future, this is something the Democrats will be talking about an awful lot.
Gloria Borger, David Axelrod, Casey Hunt, guys, thank you very much. One quick note on John Fetterman, the lieutenant governor. His wife just tweeted that he is out of surgery and the procedure to implant a pacemaker, I should say, was, in her words, perfect. Just ahead, we'll have the latest on the war in Ukraine and the battle for that steel plant in Mariupol. Retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling standing by to join us live with his assessment. Much more of our coverage coming up. Ukraine's battle for Mariupol has come to an end. The bloody defense of the besieged city and the Azovstal steel plant lasted weeks. According to the Kremlin, both Ukrainian civilians and troops were allowed to leave the plant after the troops surrendered and laid down their weapons. Ukraine's deputy defense minister says 211 troops were evacuated through a humanitarian corridor, and another 53 seriously injured troops were evacuated from the plant to a medical facility in Russian-controlled territory. Ukraine's deputy prime minister says they expect to carry out an exchange of Russian prisoners for the injured Ukrainian troops. All this comes as the Kremlin guaranteed the troops will be treated in accordance with international law. Joining us now to discuss what's going on, CNN military analyst, retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. General Hertling, thanks so much for joining us. Just how significant is this? How worried are you for the surviving Ukrainian fighters in Russian control?
Well, if we can't believe anything Russia has said in terms of the treatment of prisoners thus far, because they have not done so, they have shown us what they are. But secondly, you know, what I'd say in terms of the fighters in Mariupol, they have done a masterful job in terms of delaying and distracting Russian forces. Estimates are that somewhere between 12 and 14,000 Russian troops were involved in that action, trying to maintain the logistics supply from Rostov in Russia all the way to Odessa. And it took them almost 2 months out of their norm that they could not allow the Russian troops to move further north into the Donbass area to fight. So this action by the Ukrainian forces in the Azovstal plant, even though it was very troublesome and very worrying, a lot of casualties and a horrible condition, it really saved a lot of Ukrainians' lives if they pinned down those forces in that plant.
I also want to get your reaction, General Hertling, to part of what was said by a former Russian colonel on Russian state television on Monday. Listen to this.
Let's not wave about rockets in Finland's direction. This just looks ridiculous. The biggest flaw in our military and political situation is that we are in total geopolitical solitude, and the whole world is against us, even if we don't want to admit it. And we need a way out of this situation.
What did you think of that? Let's get a little reality check breaking through the Putin propaganda right now. What did you think of that, that statement from this former Russian colonel on Russian state TV?
Well, in listening to the entire clip, Wolf, that was just a small segment of it where he was dashing Putin's desires to divide NATO. It was a strategic implication. But I happened to listen to the entire speech by Colonel Cawthorn, and what he basically did was a damning combination of every aspect of the Russian attack, from the tactical competencies of the soldiers and the generals, to the operational design of the fight, to the strategic requirements that Putin put on his forces. They were not capable of achieving those kinds of strategic goals across the front. And many of us saw that from the very beginning when you're talking about only allocating 190,000 soldiers, which seems a lot. But when you're talking about allocating them along 7 different axes of advance, along a frontage of almost 1,400 miles, with different military objectives to seize and secure cities of over 1 million, in one case 3 million Ukrainian population, it's just not capable of coming true. And I think Colonel Cawthorn actually nailed it from the standpoint of addressing each one of Putin's strategic and operational and tactical implications on this.
General Hertling, thank you so much for your analysis. We are always appreciative. Coming up, an 8-year-old girl's bravery when shots rang out at the Buffalo supermarket. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We started this hour of the Situation Room on the Buffalo shooting, and that's where we end it, with a brave 8-year-old little girl named London Thomas. On Saturday, she went to the Tops supermarket with her mom and dad to get a birthday cake for her mom. When the shots rang out, London and her dad were not with her mom. They decided to hide in a cooler.
We went to the back of the store where the milk is, and the door was locked and we could not get out. The manager opened the door, then we had to go out the back door, and then the cops lead us out. I was scared for my mom. I did not know what happened to her because she was at the front and I was at the back. I didn't know where she was. I thought she was gone.
Thankfully, her mom wasn't hurt, and neither was London or her dad. And London says she was never scared because her dad was with her the whole time. So brave. Thanks very much for watching. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Philadelphia, reporting in the Situation Room tonight. I'll be reporting from here throughout the night, along with my colleagues Aaron Burnett, Jake Tapper, Anderson Cooper, and reporters around the country for election night in America, the midterm primaries.
Tonight, the nation is turning to Pennsylvania, a major battleground in American politics. From the Three Rivers in Pittsburgh to the striking green dome of the Capitol building in Harrisburg, the heart of government in the Commonwealth, to historic Independence Hall in Philadelphia. Voters across Pennsylvania are making a choice that will impact control of the U.S. Senate and potentially influence the 2024 presidential race. Welcome to CNN's coverage of election night in America, the midterm primaries. I'm Jake Tapper. We're standing by for results in what is sure to be an eventful election night. The political spotlight is on key primary races in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Kentucky, Idaho, and Oregon. In Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Republican senators are retiring, creating 2 open seats that both Democrats and Republicans will seek in order to win control of the U.S. Senate. Tonight will bring more clarity as to the direction of the 2 major parties. It's also a significant new test of former President Trump's grip on the Republican Party and President Biden's sway over the Democrats, as both weigh a potential rematch in 2024. Perhaps the biggest test of the Trump factor is his pick in Pennsylvania's Republican Senate race. Former TV doctor Mehmet Oz has Trump's endorsement and name recognition. Yet right now, Oz is locked in a 3-way competitive primary race against former hedge fund CEO Dave McCormick and a relatively unknown conservative, Kathy Barnett, who made a late surge. Barnett has a compelling personal story as she tries to make history as the first black Republican woman in the Senate. But she's also gained attention for her anti-gay and anti-Muslim bigotry, as well as her unfounded denial of the 2020 election results. Another key test of Trump's clout, the Republican governor's race in Pennsylvania. The former president has endorsed controversial state senator Doug Mastriano, another one of Pennsylvania's leading supporters of Trump's bogus claim that he won the 2020 election. Mastriano is running against former Congressman Lou Barletta, former U.S. Attorney Bill McSwain, and businessman Dave White. On the Democratic side, we're watching a dramatic twist in the Senate primary in Pennsylvania. The leading candidate, Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, undergoing surgery today to receive a pacemaker after suffering a stroke on Friday. His top opponents are Congressman and former Marine Connor Lamb from the Pittsburgh area and State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta from Philly. We're watching races from coast to coast. Let me bring in my colleague, Aaron Burnett. Aaron?
All right, Jake. And, in less than 30 minutes, voting ends in North Carolina, so we're really right up against it right now. Trump-backed Congressman Ted Budd is taking on one of the state's most well-known Republicans, the former Governor Pat McCrory, as well as former Congressman Mark Walker. And on the Democratic side there, Sherry Beasley is hoping to make history in November as the first black U.S. senator from North Carolina. Now, we're about to learn if Trump's support is going to help here, specifically with incumbent Congressman Madison Cawthorn. The question is whether he can survive his Republican primary. A one-time rising star of the right, Cawthorn's first term has been plagued by multiple scandals and controversies. And now State Senator Chuck Edwards and other primary rivals are hoping to put an early end to Cawthorn's congressional career. Meantime, on the other side of the country in Oregon, President Biden made his first endorsement of the midterm campaign, backing the incumbent Congressman, centrist Democrat Kurt Schrader. Schrader, though, is facing a strong primary challenge from the progressive wing of the party, Jamie McLeod Skinner. And we are standing by for first results in a lot of exciting races. There are so many of them tonight. And Jake, all the twists and turns to get us to this moment in the past few days, nobody could have predicted.
It's very exciting, Aaron. Let's check in on the marquee race of the night, the GOP Senate primary in Pennsylvania. CNN's Jeff Zeleny is at Mehmet Oz's campaign headquarters in Newtown, Pennsylvania. That's in the Philly suburbs. Jeff, what are you hearing from the Oz campaign about his prospects this evening?
Well, Jake, with just slightly less than an hour of voting left to go here in Pennsylvania, there is cautious optimism among advisors and friends and supporters of Dr. Mehmet Oz. He is tonight in the key suburbs of Philadelphia, Bucks County. That is the whole rationale for his candidacy and for the endorsement of the former President Donald Trump. He said specifically he believes that Dr. Mehmet Oz, of course, a TV celebrity making his first bid for public office, can perform well here. In fact, outperform what Mr. Trump did in 2020 and indeed in 2016. These are the critical parts of Pennsylvania. But there is optimism and worry among his supporters as well. Did they overlook Kathy Barnett in this race? Jake, one other person watching this is the former president. He's told his friends that he believes this is his biggest gamble yet in the 2022 midterm season, Jake.
All right, Jeff Zeleny, thanks so much. Now to the Democratic Senate primary in Pennsylvania. The late-breaking news on the frontrunner, Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, getting a pacemaker implanted today, even as voting was underway. CNN's Jessica Dean is at Fetterman campaign headquarters in Pittsburgh. Jessica, what can you tell us about Fetterman's condition this hour?
Well, we know that he is just out of that procedure, Jake. He's said to be headed toward a full recovery, that it went very well. He actually tweeted just recently, he said, I just got out of a procedure to implant a pacemaker with a defibrillator in my heart. We got the all clear that it was successful and that I'm on track for a full recovery. He said now it's back to resting and recovering. Now, all of this coming as earlier today, he cast his ballot from his hospital room using an emergency absentee ballot. That's how he voted for himself, not what we expected to see today. He will be watching the returns from that hospital in Lancaster at Lancaster General Hospital. That's about 4 hours from where I'm standing right now in Pittsburgh, where we are expecting his wife Giselle to address supporters. Jacobs, of course, he was supposed to be here tonight. He is considered the front runner, but again, we should see his wife later this evening. The lieutenant governor doing much better.
Jessica, you didn't want to translate the word yins there for us? The yins was in that tweet, I believe?
It is yins. I believe that's for you, all of you, y'all. It's like the southern word y'all.
Right. It's a Pittsburghism, I should say. Jessica, thanks so much.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And Dana, I mean, it may be for Lieutenant Governor Fetterman that this happens so late in the race. But Dr. Reiner, I have to ask you, how serious is this? We're told, and it's all just from him, we haven't heard anything directly from his doctors, by the Lieutenant Governor, Dr. Reiner, that he had a minor stroke. Now we're told that he's doing great. He's on his way to a full recovery. But putting a pacemaker in, that's a big deal.
He had more than a pacemaker placed, Jake. He had a defibrillator placed. And defibrillators are only placed for people who really have a substantial existing heart disease. So we were told a few days ago that the lieutenant governor had a stroke in the setting of atrial fibrillation, which is not unexpected. What is very unexpected is the implantation of a defibrillator just days after a stroke. And what this means, really, is that they found really substantial heart disease, probably a weakened heart, which would probably also be the cause of his atrial fibrillation. Now, having said all that, you know, he can and should, completely recover from this. But what it does disclose is that his heart disease appears to be more substantial than previously disclosed.
And Dr. Reiner, let me just pick up on that, because you are somebody, not only are you a world-renowned cardiologist, you're somebody who has dealt with politicians, namely the former Vice President, Dick Cheney. What does it tell you that they are not only doing this procedure, but announcing it today?
It's either a remarkable coincidence that they announce the procedure in the middle of sort of voting. This procedure almost certainly would have been scheduled for a couple of days.
they would have identified the problem, which would have been the status of the contractility, the ability of his heart to squeeze, when he was admitted to the hospital, and they would have planned this procedure over the last few days. So the disclosure during active voting is an unfortunate circumstance. When we cared for the former vice president, we learned very early that just come out with the entire story, come out with the truth. The truth is the truth, and that's really the most, I would say, satisfactory way to talk to the public about it. Just tell the truth. And when you hear these disclosures in sort of piecemeal, it makes you wonder, what aren't you hearing?
And Dr. Reiner, I know that there's going to be probably a lot more on this because, as you heard Jessica say, he's the front runner in this race. I think voters will have a lot of questions about what this means for his campaign going forward. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Back to you, Jake.
Thanks, Abby. Polls closed in Kentucky a short while ago, and CNN can now make a key projection. CNN projects that incumbent Senator Rand Paul wins the Republican primary in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Paul easily prevailing against lesser-known challengers as he seeks a third term in the U.S. Senate. The often provocative, libertarian-leaning Republican will now face the winner of the Democratic Senate primary in November. As we count down to the first results out of North Carolina, we're getting new information about the mood of the country. What's on the mind of voters in the Tar Heel state and all across the United States? Stay with us to find out on this exciting election night in America.
These are live pictures from Raleigh, North Carolina, one of the states holding high-stakes primaries tonight that are going to help shape the battle for control of Congress in November. This is a really crucial night, and we're awaiting the first results out of North Carolina right now. Polls close there just moments from now. So I want to go, as we await that, to David Chalian at our polling desk. And David, you know, as we come into this, a sense of the mood and what people voting are thinking and feeling, you've got a new national poll breaking tonight. What matters in it?
Yeah, that's right, Aaron. Tonight's primary night sets up a major midterm election in November. So we wanted to get a sense of the mood of the country and where things stand. First, our brand new poll of polls on the president's approval rating. You see that President Biden has a 40% approval rating in the CNN poll of polls. 55% disapprove. This is a huge warning sign for Democrats, the president's party. This is not where they would like to see the president's numbers come November. We also asked folks to get a sense about how things are going in the U.S. And look at this, Aaron. 65% of Americans in our brand new CNN poll tonight say they are concerned about how things are going in the U.S. Only 4% excited, 10% optimistic. Even 1 in 5 say that they are scared. We also wanted to check in on the issue matrix here. What's driving people's vote across the country? Number one issue by far, nearly 6 in 10 Americans in our poll say it is the economy, followed by 30% that say it's domestic or social issues. Only 3% say foreign policy. And then we also wanted to get a sense of just how people are feeling about politics in America, Aaron. Look at this. A majority of Americans, 53%, basically say they're burned out on politics. 23%, nearly a quarter, say they're fired up. 24%, another quarter, say neither. But let's look at that across party lines when it comes to those who say they're fired up. 33% of Republicans say they're fired up. That's true of only 25% of Democrats and 14% of independents who say that. So this is a little bit of that enthusiasm advantage on display here that we've been talking about for the Republicans in this midterm political climate, Aaron.
All right, David, thank you very much. Okay, so what does this mean? Chris Wallace, let me start with you. I mean, when you look at a situation where the incumbent president situation is deteriorated even from April, right, and here we are in mid-May, and you look at 1 in 5 people are scared, 65% concerned, 60% worried about the economy. They're not fired up. If this is what we're seeing nationally, if we're seeing it in Pennsylvania and North Carolina tonight, what does it mean?
This isn't a shot across the bow of Joe Biden and the Democrats. This is a shot right amidships, and they're taking on water. You know, you look at first midterms after a new president, and that's what we got, a new president in 2020. This is his first midterm. That's always tough for the incumbent party, the party of the president. On average, since World War II, 1 Senate seat lost, 23 seats lost in the House. If that were to happen here, Republicans take back both the Senate and the House. But it gets even worse than that, because if the president's approval rating is below +5, and according to this poll that we just heard from David, it's -15, then on average in a midterm, the president's party loses 39 seats in the House. I don't have to remind my friend David Axelrod about 2010,
yes,
when the Democrats lost 64 seats in the House.
Yes.
That could be a good night compared to what happens this November.
Wow.
I still have the tire tracks on my rear end from that. I remember it very, very well. That's not going to happen this time, only because there are fewer competitive districts than there were back in 2010. But look, we just saw the doctor giving his report on Lieutenant Governor Fetterman. If you were a doctor and you were looking at this chart, you would say these vital signs are very, very bad. And the last one on enthusiasm is really a big concern for Democrats. One of the reasons incumbent parties do so poorly in the midterm elections is it's hard to galvanize the base when you're the incumbent. People come out to vote their anxiety, their protest, rarely their affirmation. And right now there's a lot of energy behind the Republicans. And so, you know, what Democrats are hoping is tonight that Republicans will nominate candidates who will be poor general election candidates. That is really the hope that you hear Democrats articulate.
How pathetic is it, honestly, that you have to hope that the other side's going to do your work for you because you can't do your own work? And I think it's a real problem for them. The number that I was kind of looking at is that 53% of voters are burned out. We understand that. Yeah. Of course, we understand why. And I was talking to a Republican pollster the other day who said he did a focus group, and he said what Republicans wanted was somebody to rescue them from this kind of malaise and excite them and fight for them. And he said to me, I think it's the same on the Democratic side. They want a fighter, which is why Fetterman appeals to Democrats. And they want a fighter. Maybe that's why Barnett appeals to Republicans. I mean, who knows? But if you're sick and tired of this, you're not enthusiastic, and you're burned out, who can you go to?
Well, I mean, this is the big question, of course, as we come into this. And as I mentioned, we are closing in right now, just a few minutes away from the end of voting in North Carolina. So less than 10 minutes from those polls closing. That is the first big test tonight of former President Trump's hold on the Republican Party. Will Trump's support help scandal-plagued Congressman Madison Cawthorn keep his job? Or will a top primary rival knock Cawthorn out of the running? Just one of the many races, even in North Carolina, that are so crucial tonight. We're standing by for those results after this.
Now we're just minutes away from the end of voting in beautiful North Carolina, where former President Trump's grip on the Republican Party is being tested tonight ahead of the crucial midterm battles for control of the House and Senate. In the GOP Senate primary, Congressman Ted Budd has Trump's endorsement against political veterans former Governor Pat McCrory and former Congressman Mark Walker. They're all vying to replace retiring Republican Richard Burr for a seat that may be crucial in deciding the balance of power in the U.S. Senate this fall. We're also watching a key House race in western North Carolina and the fate of the very controversial incumbent, Congressman Madison Cawthorn. Cawthorn has been under fire by some of the state's top Republicans despite having Trump's support. Cawthorn is facing multiple primary challengers, including State Senator Chuck Edwards. And in central North Carolina, former college football player and political newcomer Bo Hines is Trump's pick for the House seat in the state's newest congressional district. His most well-known opponent in a crowded field is former Congresswoman Renee Elmers. The first results in North Carolina are just minutes away. Let's go to the headquarters right now of Republican Senate candidate Ted Budd. CNN's Eva McKend is there in Bermuda Run, North Carolina. Eva, how much help does Budd expect to get tonight from Trump's endorsement?
Well, Jake, Congressman Ted Budd heads into election night feeling pretty good and the clear favorite to take on Democrat Sherry Beasley in the general election. He actually was endorsed by the former president almost a year ago, so he's been able to benefit from that for quite some time. A win for Congressman Budd would be a win for Trump. I was actually on the campaign trail this week with Congressman Budd, and I asked him if he attributes a potential victory, if he would attribute that to the former president. He told me it was the former president that sort of woke up the base here and got them interested in his campaign. So we will have to see tonight. Congressman Budd's closest opponent, former Governor Pat McCrory. Jake?
All right, Eva, thank you so much. Now let's go to another Trump-endorsed candidate, the embattled North Carolina Congressman Madison Cawthorn. Diane Gallagher is at Cawthorn campaign headquarters in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Diane, what are you learning about Cawthorn's contacts with former President Trump in the final hours before the election?
Yeah, Jake, I spoke with Congressman Cawthorn just a little bit ago, and he tells me that he talked on the phone with former President Trump yesterday, just a little while after he posted that sort of get out the vote message on the Truth Social platform, acknowledging the foolish mistakes, in Trump's words, that Cawthorn had made, but encouraging voters to give him a second chance. Now, Cawthorn tells me that he is confident and that he believes, quote, his brand of conservatism is going to be victorious in North Carolina tonight, offering some sort of like rebuke of what he calls the establishment, which has worked so hard to unseat him. He also, of course, Jake, acknowledged the potential awkwardness that is in store if he does, in fact, win tonight with North Carolina's delegation, specifically U.S. Senator Thom Tillis.
All right, Diane, thank you so much. And now let's go to John King. John, you know, it feels like North Carolina is a red state, but then you have to remember their governor's a Democrat. A Democrat can win there statewide.
Can. The question is, in this midterm year, especially with the dynamics just laid out by David Chalian, can the Democrats get something? To your point, though, Jake, I'll start over here since you mentioned it. We have a 50-50 Senate. That's why all of these Senate primaries matter. North Carolina currently has a Republican incumbent who's leaving, Senator Burr. The same with Pennsylvania, which we'll get to later. But let's come back to North Carolina, because the Trump endorsement, this is one of the places where we'll see the power of a Trump endorsement. You see Congressman Ted Budd. He was trailing the former Governor Pat McCrory early on. It was that Trump endorsement that helped give him a boost, and then outside money coming into the race. But this we're seeing in a lot of states. Three very conservative candidates on the ballot for Republicans tonight. You mentioned this is a state Republicans think they're going to win in November, but remember, look how close it was. 49.9 to 48.6. This was a close race. You see the blue areas here. That's what we'll watch tonight. The Republicans believe this is the year they make a comeback in the suburbs. Donald Trump hurt them in the suburbs, so watch the votes around Charlotte, around Raleigh, around Durham, around Winston-Salem, and out of Nashville. And as Eva was just talking about, in addition to the Senate race, we're also, of course, watching this House race, the one we're watching most of all out here, Jake, Madison Cawthorn's race. Chuck Edwards is the leading candidate. The Republican establishment has coalesced around him. That is in a very conservative western part of the state. The question for Madison Cawthorn, can he get 30%? If he does, he avoids a runoff. We'll watch as we count votes in just a few seconds.
All right, John King, thank you so much. And we are just moments away from the end of voting in North Carolina at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, awaiting the first results from the pivotal U.S. Senate primaries. On the Republican side, this will be the first big test of the night of former President Trump's endorsement power. So let's get a key race alert. Well, it's too early to call the Republican Senate primary in North Carolina right now, where Trump-backed Congressman Ted Budd faces former Governor Pat McCrory and former Congressman Mark Walker. It's also too early to call North Carolina's Democratic Senate primary, where the party has essentially cleared the field for its preferred candidate, former state Supreme Court Chief Justice Sherry Beasley. Now, in the battle for the House, it's too early to call the race in North Carolina's 11th congressional district, where the controversial incumbent Congressman Madison Cawthorn is facing multiple Republican primary challengers. And it is also too early to call the Republican primary in North Carolina's 13th congressional district. That's where political newcomer Bo Hines is trying to win a seat in Congress with Trump's endorsement. Aaron?
All right, well, Jake, as we await those first results from North Carolina, I want to go to David Chalian, because one thing that, you just heard Jake talking about there with John King, right, is the role of the former President Trump, what these races mean for him. So, David, what do you have there?
Yeah, and I think it's important to think about this on two different tracks, Aaron. There's President Trump's sort of endorsement record, but there's also the fact that President Trump's influence on the party is clear throughout all these candidacies, whether he backed them or not. Take a look at this national NBC News poll of Republican primary voters taken just a few days ago. 55% of Republican primary voters think Trump should lead the Republican Party, a majority of Republicans. A third say he was a good president, but it's time for new leaders. Only 10% of Republicans, as you would expect, would say he was a bad president and it's time to move on. Will the Trump endorsement make you more likely to support a candidate? This Quinnipiac University poll says overall, with the entire electorate, only 18% say the Trump endorsement is going to make them more likely to support a candidate. But among Republicans, it's 45% of Republicans who say the Trump endorsement makes them more likely to support a candidate. And then we wanted to take a look at sort of the importance of the candidate's support for Trump in a Republican primary. And this is an interesting split. If you'd look at extremely important and very important, that 27% and 23%, that adds up to half. 50% say it's extremely or very important for their candidate to support Trump. Whereas 28% say somewhat important, 22% say not at all important. Again, half. So half of Republicans say extremely important, very important. And this is in the state of Pennsylvania, we should make clear. This is the Fox News poll in Pennsylvania. Half say it's only somewhat or not at all important. And Aaron, for that scorecard that we're talking about, this is what we were tracking going into tonight. Donald Trump had some key victories with J.D. Vance in the Ohio Senate race, with Alex Mooney in that West Virginia congressional race. They won with his backing. He had one loss so far in May, big loss. Charles Herbster, the gubernatorial candidate in Nebraska that he backed, he did not make it through. But this is what is at stake tonight for the former president and his own brand and power in the party. Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano, the gubernatorial candidate, Ted Budd, as we were just discussing in North Carolina, Madison Cawthorn in his race for re-election to become the nominee again, and Janice McGeachin, the lieutenant governor out in Idaho, who's challenging the governor there inside a Republican Party and doing so with Trump's backing. We're going to learn a lot about Trump's personal power to help these candidates get over the finish line in Republican primaries, Aaron.
All right, David. And, pretty incredible. As we all know, there's nobody who's tracking the win-loss more closely than Donald Trump himself. All right, so let me ask you, because I hear all this and you're saying, wow, 55% of GOP, want Trump to lead their party. 50%, his endorsement, extremely or very important to be influential in their vote. Okay, those numbers sound enormous. Yet months ago, it was 80% of the Republican Party supported Donald Trump. So do you see this as, wow, these numbers are big? Or do you see it differently?
They're not insignificant, but tonight's going to be revelatory about the future of the power of his endorsement. I'll be looking to Pennsylvania, where former administration officials like Mike Pompeo, for example, endorsed against the former president.
Right.
If that ends up being successful, that's going to chip away at the power of that endorsement. And one thing I'd note about Ted Budd in North Carolina, he had the perfect storm of an endorsement where he both had an early Donald Trump endorsement, but also the very powerful Club for Growth. So he benefited from both sides of that, which some other candidates have not had that.
Sure, I would just add to what Alyssa said. I think candidates matter here, ultimately, right? People look at the president's endorsement, and it matters. But as you saw in Governor Herbster's case, it didn't matter so much, right? I mean, J.D. Vance in Ohio and Mooney, both very solid candidates. Herbster, not that great a candidate. We're going to, as Alyssa points out, we're going to see tonight whether or not people believe that Dr. Oz is a good candidate. I think they may not. I think it may break against Dr. Oz, and we'll see if the president's endorsement is enough to get him by.
Right, and I should note, of course, you were a donor to David McCormick.
Donor and supporter of David McCormick, who I think is going to win.
Right. I just putting it out there. Go ahead, Van.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, a couple things. First of all, Trump may win some tonight, he may lose some tonight. Trumpism is winning everywhere. And I think that's what's terrifying Democrats. If you had told us a year and a half ago that you couldn't even be a viable Republican unless you signed off to these election lies and bowed down and kissed the ring, at least theoretically, you would say, no, it's not possible. But that's where we are. I think, to your point, it's not just the big mouth of Donald Trump, there's also the big money. And you are starting to see some cracks here. Club for Growth has done some stuff to go against Trump. And so Club for Growth, that's a big pile of money that's being weaponized. And I think there are people now trying to test, can you go to the right of Trump? Can you go around Trump? But at the end of the day, we're looking tonight, you're going to see that Trumpism has won everywhere, whether Trump wins or not.
Right, because even the candidates he does not support, almost all of them, I mean, they're in a race to see who can be more Trumpy, David.
Well, that's correct. I mean, everybody gets up and says, like, I'm the most Trumpy candidate here, right? I'm always for the most conservative candidate that can win in a general election. I think that's what Republicans need to step back, right? Everybody can be more Trumpy than the next person, but can you win in the fall? Pennsylvania is a purple state traditionally, and being the most Trumpy candidate is not necessarily the best outcome.
Right. Well, we're going to see. I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see that. And, of course, that tonight. All right. Thanks to all who are going to be with us throughout this important evening as we expect the first results out of North Carolina at any moment. You got that key race alert. Those numbers are feeding in. And we are also looking ahead to some of the hottest races tonight in Pennsylvania because polls close there at the top of the hour. So counting down to that, we'll be back in a moment.
And we have a key race alert for you right now in the Tar Heel state of North Carolina on the Republican side for the Senate Republican primary race. Congressman Ted Budd is in the lead. He is 3,718 votes ahead of former Governor Pat McCrory. Budd has 50.4% of the vote, McCrory 35.6%. Former Congressman Mark Walker pulling up in third place with 5.8%. We should caution you, it's early. This is with only 3% of the vote in. But as of right now, Ted Budd, well, more votes came in. 50.2% of the vote over McCrory 33.3%, Walker with 9.0%. On the Democratic side, for the Senate race, the former state Supreme Court Justice Sherry Beasley is way ahead with 88.9% of the vote over Rhett Newton, who has 0.9% of the vote. The Democrats in the Tar Heel state basically cleared the race for Sherry Beasley, and she is more than 50,000 votes ahead, John King.
And Jake, if you look at the map, the key point you just made is it's very early. We're at 3% of the estimated vote in, but Ted Budd does have an early lead. You'd rather be ahead than behind at any point in the race. And if you look at the map as it fills in, you see Ted Budd's colors just about everywhere. McCrory so far winning Mecklenburg County, which is the #1 county in the state by population. So you always like to live where the people are, Charlotte and the suburbs around it. But it is just one county. We'll watch the votes come in. And just remember, Trump runs really strong in the smaller rural counties. That's where we question, does the endorsement work? How are Trump voters coming out? Rural voters versus urban and suburban voters, the key dynamic in all parties, but especially in the Republican Party, as we learn. Who does the Republican base want in this election year? This is the Senate race so far on the Republican side. We're going to wait and count more votes. Just want to take a quick look out here. Madison Cawthorn, obviously the embattled Republican incumbent in the 11th congressional district. And again, about 11% of the vote in this district. Asheville, this is in the southwestern corner of the state, 34%, 35% if you were to round that up to 30% there, 468 votes. Again, I'm going to remind you of the rules here. State law matters. 30%. As long as the winning candidate is above 30%, you are the nominee. In some states, this would be a runoff if it ended up like this, but 34% would be enough to win if that holds up, Jake, as we watch this count out. 34% for Madison Cawthorn, 30% for Chuck Edwards. There are a handful of other candidates in this race as well. They're not expected to be contenders, but we'll watch the votes play out. And as you know, I just want to pop back out, look over on the Democratic side. This is a tough race for the Democrats, but Sherry Beasley, former state Supreme Court Justice, winning nearly 90% of the votes so far. The Democrats essentially cleared the field for her, an uphill race, but in a 50-50 Senate. Every one of those counts as we go through it, Jake. And just take one more quick peek at the Senate race before we go. Still at 3%, Ted Budd at 51%, leading for now. A lot of votes to count.
Yep, a lot of counting to do, John King. Thanks so much. As we stand by for more votes in North Carolina, we're heading into another critical hour as polls begin to close in places such as Pennsylvania. Voters across the Commonwealth are making their mark on the midterm election landscape. The first Pennsylvania results straight ahead. Stay with us. And we have a new projection to share with you right now. CNN projects that Sherry Beasley wins the Democratic Senate primary in North Carolina. She's the former Chief Justice of the North Carolina State Supreme Court. She will face the Republican primary winner for the seat now held by a Republican, the retiring Senator Richard Burr. If Beasley wins in November, she would be the first black U.S. Senator to represent North Carolina. But Abby and Dana, I have to say, it's going to be difficult for a Democrat to be elected statewide in North Carolina in these midterm elections with so much of the wind at the Republicans' backs.
Certainly, it will be difficult for Democrats. But Abby, what is fascinating about this Democratic race, the one that Jake just called, is that this was pretty much a foregone conclusion, that the leadership cleared the field for her to win. What we are waiting for tonight, and which really will be determinative of whether or not this is a GOP seat the Democrats can flip of course, is who the Republican is going to be.
And I think the big question tonight in this state and in a lot of the other states that we've been looking at over the last several weeks is you're seeing a divided Republican primary. You're seeing Republican voters split between 2, 3, or more voters. And the question on the Republican side is, can they unite? The Democrats have already done that, and that, even in a tough environment, gives them a bit of a head start. We should also remind people, Trump won this state by just 1.3 percentage points, so it's an uphill battle, but it's not a runaway Trump state by any stretch of the imagination, Drake.
And we're closing in on the end of voting in Pennsylvania and the very first results from the marquee Pennsylvania primary race tonight. The longtime TV doctor Mehmet Oz vying for the Republican Senate nomination against two top rivals, including a relative unknown conservative who has suddenly become a serious contender. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And CNN can now make a major projection in the state of North Carolina. CNN projects that Congressman Ted Budd wins the Republican Senate nomination. That's a key victory for a candidate endorsed by former President Trump. Budd defeating two political veterans, including the state's former governor. Budd will face the winner of the Democratic Senate primary, Sherry Beasley, for the seat now being held by retiring Republican Richard Burr. And we have a key race alert for you right now. In the House of Representatives, Congressman Madison Cawthorn is facing serious headwinds in his race for re-election. He is losing right now, with 36% of the vote in, to State Senator Chuck Edwards. Chuck Edwards with 37.8% of the vote, 3,944 votes ahead of incumbent Congressman Cawthorn. Now, there is still quite a bit of vote to count, but that is a significant moment for Madison Cawthorn. He better hope that trends do not continue that way. Just minutes from now, polling places close in Pennsylvania's closely watched Senate primaries. President Biden and former President Trump both have a stake in these competitive races. On the Republican side, former TV doctor Mehmet Oz has Trump's endorsement, yet Oz is locked in a tight battle with former hedge fund CEO Dave McCormick and conservative commentator Kathy Barnett. Barnett has gained attention for anti-gay and anti-Muslim bigotry and her unfounded denials of the 2020 election results, but also a compelling personal story. In the Democratic Senate primary, Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman spent this election day getting a pacemaker implanted after having a stroke on Friday. We'll see if that impacts his race in any way against Congressman Connor Lamb and State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta. All of these candidates are fighting for an open seat now held by Republicans, a seat that could be critical in deciding control of the U.S. Senate this fall. As we count down to the end of voting in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I'm joined by Anderson Cooper. Anderson, there's another big race we're following in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, there certainly is, Jake. Pennsylvania's Democratic governor is term limited, and a slew of Republicans are competing for the job. Donald Trump made a late endorsement of State Senator Doug Mastriano, a vocal champion of Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. President Trump actively urged voters not to support former U.S. Attorney Bill McSwain, saying that he failed to act to overturn the presidential election. Mastriano, McSwain, former Congressman Lou Barletta, and businessman Dave White are at the top contenders vying for the nomination. Now, in the Democratic race for governor, Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro is running unopposed, Jay.
Anderson, thanks so much. Let's go to Jeff Zeleny. He's at Mehmet Oz's campaign headquarters in Newtown, Pennsylvania, right outside Philly. Jeff, you're hearing more about the Trump factor in the Oz campaign. Tell us.
Jake, we are, and really with just a couple minutes to go before the polls close, the central question hanging over this entire race, was the former president's endorsement enough to pull Dr. Mehmet Oz across the finish line? As late as last evening, there was deep worry, which is why the former president called into an Oz rally, and he said Oz is truly MAGA. He truly supports the movement. Well, the voters here will determine that. Jake, this whole Pennsylvania primary, an expensive one at that, some $70 million in ads spent alone, has made one thing clear. Trump clearly controls the Republican Party, but can he control his own movement? That will be determined tonight. But we are told by friends that he is nervously eyeing the outcome here in Pennsylvania. Jake?
All right, Jeff, thanks so much. Let's go to Athena Jones now. She's at Kathy Barnett's Senate campaign headquarters in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. Athena, where is Barnett hoping to do well this evening? Where are her parts of Pennsylvania?
Hi, Jake. Well, I just want to mention that Kathy Barnett just entered this room. A big roar, cheers went out a few minutes ago as she came in, thanking her supporters and hugging people. They're expecting her to do well in eastern Pennsylvania. Her campaign say they're feeling great, that she's going to be able to see a lot of voters, late-breaking voters, move her way. They expect to see her do well in places like Bucks County, Berks County, also the Philadelphia area. And they believe that, she has done the work and that she will be rewarded for it by crisscrossing the state, traveling hundreds of miles. She believes she's met a bunch of voters and that they are going to support her. Jake?
All right, Athena Jones, thanks so much. Thanks so much. John King, some nail biters going on in Pennsylvania right now.
Remember, it took us a week to count the votes last time in Pennsylvania in the presidential race. Jake, you know the Commonwealth well. It's home to you. So you know about 40% of the voters are right here. Philadelphia and the collar counties are around at about 40% of the vote. So can one candidate run it up where the more affluent, college-educated Republicans live? Can they run it up there? And this part here, the middle of the country, that's Trump country. Does Kathy Barnett get that vote, or does that endorsement for Dr. Oz do it? And remember, this is the Senate race on the Republican side. The governor's race matters too, because the governor appoints the Secretary of State. Could have 2024 ramifications, Jake.
All right, John King, thanks so much. We're closing in on the end of voting in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the first results from the highest profile Senate race tonight. We'll see how the Trump-endorsed candidate, TV Dr. Mehmet Oz, fares against two very competitive challengers, including the late-surging conservative Kathy Barnett. Here's our key race alert. It is too early to call Pennsylvania's Republican Senate primary as of now. The very competitive three-way race pitting Dr. Mehmet Oz against former hedge fund CEO Dave McCormick and conservative firebrand Kathy Barnett. On the Democratic side, it is also too early to call the Senate primary, featuring Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, Congressman Connor Lamb, and State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta. It is also too early to call the Republican primary race for Pennsylvania governor. Doug Mastriano, the Trump-endorsed candidate, is running against former Congressman Lou Barletta, former U.S. Attorney Bill McSwain, and businessman Dave White. But we do have a projection to make in the Democratic governor's race. And CNN projects Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro will be the Democratic nominee for Pennsylvania governor. Shapiro coasts through uncontested. He will face the winner of the Republican gubernatorial primary in the fall. Dana Bash Shapiro is counting on having a Republican candidate, a Republican competitor, whom he can easily paint as extreme.
Absolutely. He's already starting to do that. We should note that Josh Shapiro announced that he's positive for COVID, so I'm not sure that we're actually going to see him tonight. But Jake is exactly right. He became a national figure during the time between the November election, and when the inauguration happened, because as the Attorney General in Pennsylvania, he was very aggressive about pushing back against GOP efforts to overturn the election there. And depending on who he has as his opponent, he might be fighting that exact same fight, not just about looking back to 2020, but potentially looking ahead to 2024.
Democrats want to make this about contrast as much as possible. And if the Republicans nominate the person that Trump has endorsed, Mastriano, in this race, Josh Shapiro will have probably the starkest contrast that he could have on the issue of the election. But also what Democrats are teeing up is the governor's races across the country being a last vanguard against the sort of push forward of, right-wing policies, especially on the issue of abortion. And Shapiro himself has said he is the person, if he is elected governor, that's going to be standing in the way of a Republican legislature pushing forward abortion bans. That's the kind of message you're going to hear from him on that issue. And you're probably going to hear it from a lot of other Democrats in governor's races all across the country.
Abby, thanks so much. I'm jealous right now. My colleague Wolf Blitzer is in Pennsylvania, specifically in Philadelphia. Wolf, tell us what's going on there.
Jake, we're following all the key races in Pennsylvania tonight, including the Republican contest for governor. CNN's Melanie Zanona is at the campaign headquarters of the Trump-backed candidate, Doug Mastriano. Melanie, there's some finger-pointing happening among Pennsylvania Republicans tonight. Update our viewers. What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Yeah, the polls have only just now closed, but the blame game among Republicans is already starting to heat up. For weeks, the frontrunner in this race has been State Senator Doug Mastriano. He has made lies about the 2020 election a centerpiece of his campaign, and some Republicans fear that he is too extreme to win this key battleground state come November. Privately, Republicans are pointing a finger at the state party organization for not endorsing a candidate and for allowing this vacuum to emerge. One GOP operative said it was foolish and said, quote, everyone is collectively losing their minds here. But one person who was not shy about getting into this race, Donald Trump. He endorsed Mastriano in the 11th hour over the weekend. That was a huge boost for Mastriano. But look, the stakes are high here. The governor is allowed to appoint whoever oversees the state elections. And so this race has implications beyond 2022. Wolf.
Interesting point. Thanks very much for that. I want to bring in Casey Hunt, Michael Swerconish. They're going to be with me assessing what's going on. Both of you guys are Pennsylvania natives, so you know a lot about this state. There seems to be a lot of unconventional candidates, Michael, right now who are gaining some traction. Tell us about that.
Well, I would say that one of the reasons that you can gain traction as an unconventional candidate in Pennsylvania is because we are one of 9 closed primary states. I am one of 1.4 million Pennsylvanians shut out of this election today. Very frustrating for me because it's so darn exciting. And I think that rewards passion, meaning you get the fringes in both parties who come out and dominate primary elections. For example, I don't think that the Democratic U.S. Senate candidate who will win tonight, in all likelihood, John Fetterman, is necessarily the strongest general election candidate, and nor do I feel that way about Doug Mastriano, the likely Republican who will win the gubernatorial race. But passion rules the roost, and that's what you're about to see.
Well, and one thing too, Wolf, I have to say, so I've done a lot of years, I often go to, in particular, Walmart parking lots to talk to voters. So I did that a couple days ago in York, Pennsylvania, which is a pretty red county, but it does have a contingent of Democrats. I was there for a John Fetterman event, and usually you get a mix of, you know, you can find some Democrats, Republicans. I found both. I found supporters of Connor Lamb, John Fetterman, Mehmet Oz, some others. But I also got a contingent of voters who were angry that I was asking. I got, you know, typical non-voters. You run into people who don't vote or they're not familiar or whatever reason. But this was one of the first times I'd gone to a parking lot, talked to people, and found a group that just said, why would I bother doing that? And their voices were sort of angry. Their posture was, who cares? Why? The system is failing me. And I think that helps explain a little bit of why Michael is right that it is about the way the parties have kind of polarized and they're going to the polls. But I also think the people are just really pissed off. They're really angry about what's going on, and they don't feel like anyone can help them. I mean, they tried it with the Trump administration, then they switched. They handed power in Washington to Democrats, and now inflation has gone rampant. People are really unhappy with their lives. So I think that contributes a little bit to this phenomenon, too.
You get the same sense?
There are a lot of push-button issues that do have people infuriated. Inflation at a 40-year high, I think, is one of them. I think the situation on the border for Republicans is another. I mean, there's a whole laundry list of things that just produce agita, for lack of a better expression. And you're seeing those type of voters upset about them showing up today. But there are a whole host of folks who are not coming out either because they can't or because they don't have interest, and their voice isn't heard.
Let's go back to Jake. Jake, I understand you have a key race alert right now.
I do, Wolf. Let's take a look at what these Pennsylvania voters are actually thinking. Let's go to the Republican Senate primary right now. CNN, with 1% of the vote in, has Dave McCormick in the lead position, 42.6% of the vote. He is 2,418 votes ahead of Mehmet Oz, the Trump-endorsed candidate, the TV doctor, who has 22.7% of the vote, and firebrand Kathy Barnett has 15.6% of the vote. That is only with 1% of the vote in, but right now, at this hour, Dave McCormick has the lead. On the Democratic side, John Fetterman, the lieutenant governor, has a whopping 57.4% of the vote. He is 13,604 votes ahead of Congressman Connor Lamb, who has 39.7% of the vote, and State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta from the Philadelphia area, who has 2.1% of the vote. That is with a minority of the vote. Now let's take a look at the Republican gubernatorial primary right now, who's going to run for governor against Josh Shapiro, the incumbent, the Democrat who's the Attorney General. Bill McSwain is in first place right now. He has 26.7% of the vote. He is roughly 1,800 votes ahead of the guy in second place, Doug Mastriano, the Trump-endorsed candidate, who has 11.6% of the vote. Former Congressman Lou Barletta is in third place with 10.9% of the vote. Businessman Dave White has 10.8% of the vote. This is with only 1% of the estimated vote in right now. We're also waiting right now for, oh, look at this. In North Carolina, let's look at this. Incumbent Congressman Madison Cawthorn is still in second place. Madison Cawthorn is behind State Senator Chuck Edwards. Chuck Edwards in first place with 38% of the vote. Now it's 38% of the vote. He is 4,088 votes ahead of the incumbent Republican Congressman Madison Cawthorn, who has 27.3% of the vote. That is with more of the vote in than the last time we looked at this. This is 37% of the vote. John King, this is shaping up, at least as of right now, to be not a good night for Madison Cawthorn, and that race, now we can stick in Pennsylvania. You can stick in Pennsylvania. And Dave McCormick doing well. It's early, 1% in, but Dave McCormick doing well right now.
It is early, Jake, and that's the key point. Again, 67 counties in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Allegheny County is the only one reporting votes so far. Perhaps that will change as it often does as we start to count them. This is the second largest county in the state, just shy of 10% of the population, so it matters. It's a big population center. But we have seen in the Ohio Senate race, in the Nebraska's governor's race, a more moderate, these are all conservatives running, but you would say Dave McCormick is the most moderate or the least conservative of the leading Senate candidates here. Maybe Dr. Oz would disagree with that, but he pull out in the early vote. You've seen this repeat time after time after time in traditional voting areas that a more traditional candidate, maybe that's the best way to put it, pulls out first. But this is 1% of the vote statewide. And as you know, when you pull it out, it's still only 12% of the vote in Allegheny County. So we have a long way to go in a very complicated, diverse state like Pennsylvania. But Dave McCormick has an early lead again. You'd always rather be ahead than behind. Dr. Oz in second place at 23 if you round up. Kathy Barnett at 16% if you round up there, but a long way to go. You also mentioned the governor's race. Again, often you see in both Nebraska and Ohio, we had candidates pull out to an early lead who ended up being third. So let's just wait and strap in and count some votes as we go through it. But Bill McSwain, the former U.S. attorney, ahead by 431 votes in the early count as we go through. On the Democratic side, let me come back to this again. Just look at the Democratic side in the Senate race here. Again, it's 6% of the vote statewide, they believe, in the Democratic race. The only interesting part about this is Fetterman leading. This is Connor Lamb's part of the state. He's a congressman from out here in the Pittsburgh area. So to see the Lieutenant Governor Fetterman leading, even in what you would say is Connor Lamb's backyard, is interesting. But again, it is incredibly early. Let's walk down to North Carolina, that race you were talking about. First, I'm just going to pop up the Senate Democratic primary. We've already projected the former state Supreme Court Chief Justice Sherry Beasley as the winner. The Senate Republican, we've already projected Ted Budd as the winner. Just look how impressive it is, though. You see that pink? That is Ted Budd filling in most of the map. This is a very impressive win for a congressman who struggled early on. The Trump endorsement, Club for Growth money, certainly helping fuel him. And now let's go to this Republican side, because will you have a very MAGA incumbent Republican congressman beat in his primary? Look, Trump is still with Madison Cawthorn. The rest of the Republican establishment has run as fast as it can for Madison Cawthorn and tried to support most of them, Chuck Edwards. Chuck Edwards now at 38%, Cawthorn at 27%. Some states you'd have runoffs. In this state, if the winning candidate is a leading candidate is above 30%, they get the nomination. So with about 37% of the vote in, Chuck Edwards right now leading. If that margin held up, Jake, he would be the Republican nominee in the 11th Congressional District, and this is a very red area. He would be the next congressman from North Carolina, most likely. But again, we'll watch as the votes come in. But if you're Congressman Cawthorn tonight, you are thinking 2 years of constant controversy, ranging from supporting the big lie, from saying it was Antifa in the Capitol on January 6th, to accusing the House Republican leadership of having orgies and using cocaine. You would say this is all maybe adding up on Madison Cawthorn. And as we count the votes there and watch them, let's come back up to Pennsylvania and let's switch it over to the Senate Republican race. Now you see, again, we started with just votes in the West. I'm going to slide the map over a little bit. We have some votes in the East, including the #1 county right here, the biggest area in the state, #1 population center is Philadelphia. And you see Dr. Oz there. His headquarters tonight is just outside of Philadelphia in Bucks County. He is counting on the Trump endorsement helping him. He's counting on his celebrity helping him with the largest population center in the state right here. Dr. Oz opening up, very modest lead. Look, 574 votes to 540 votes. We have a long way to count in Philadelphia, and Jake, as you well know, sometimes that takes a bit. Let's move over here as well to Bucks County as you start to move out into the suburban caller. It is Dave McCormick with the early lead there. About 11% said in Bucks County there, and then you move up a little further to Northampton County. You're moving away now, Allentown area here, Scranton as you keep going up. Dave McCormick leading early there. Again, when you pull back out, 67 counties in the state, 4 of them with results so far, a very long way to go, but clearly evidence that we're going to bounce around a little bit in this hotly contested Senate race.
I don't want to overanalyze it, John, but the big buckets of Republican votes are the ones where McCormick is doing well. Those collar counties, there are numerically, I don't think there are a ton of Republican votes in the city of Philadelphia, even if that is the breadbasket of voters in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, right?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Now, so you can come back to the presidential map and look here. It's all blue here, right? It's all blue for Biden in this part of the country. But if you come in Philadelphia itself, Trump was blown out. Not a ton of Republicans there. And the Republicans that are there, again, are your urban and then close-in suburban Republicans are the ones who revolted against Donald Trump. But when you move over here, Montgomery County, you see Trump got 36%. You come up to Bucks County, Trump got 47%. There are a lot of traditional Republicans in the suburbs around Philadelphia. Again, you know it well, Jake, you grew up there. And these are the Republicans who made George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush president of the United States, for traditionally supporting Republican candidates. The question is, Republicans do believe in 2022, with Trump not on the ballot and with inflation, with the wind in the Democrats' face, Republicans believe they can have a resurgence in the suburbs. These primaries are one test. November will be the big test. But seeing who votes, where the margins are, and which of these Republican candidates, this is the governor's race here, and you see McSwain's leading everywhere we have votes right now, but again, you're seeing votes in the more moderate areas of the state right now, which is why you see a more moderate candidate, someone Trump openly opposes, winning right now on the governor's race. You come over to the Senate race side here. Again, 2% of we have a long way to go counting votes in the Commonwealth. But yes, that Dave McCormick is pulling into early leads in those traditional areas tells you traditional Republicans, or with the former hedge fund manager, a more traditional Republican candidate, if we rewound the tape 8 or 10 years. We don't live in that Republican Party anymore, so we have a long way to count.
Right, and one of the lessons that we've learned from the Trump years was that he was able to build up the margins of victory in those counties that weren't Pittsburgh or Harrisburg or Philadelphia, so that instead of a Democrat like Barack Obama, and I'm just making up these numbers, but losing 60-40, a Democrat like Hillary Clinton would lose to Donald Trump, 80-20. And those are the areas that I think Kathy Barnett and Mehmet Oz, if the Trump endorsement really has weight, where they could do really well.
Right, and a key point, let's just move over. Let's go back in time 2 weeks to neighboring Ohio when J.D. Vance, with the Trump endorsement, won. You see all this pink in the rural areas. That's Trump country. Rural America is Trump country, or Trumpism country if you don't want to associate it directly with the former president. But the forces that he unleashed in the party, or that he maximized, put on steroids in the party, you see them here. When we first started counting in Ohio 2 weeks ago, Matt Dolan, the more moderate candidate, was in the head. He got the government establishment vote in Columbus. He got Cleveland and the suburbs around Cleveland. He took an early lead, but then rural Ohio swamped him. The question is, who will rural Pennsylvania go for in a Republican primary? Small counties, but when you add up all these votes, just ask Donald Trump. They count.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're awaiting more votes in that pivotal Republican Senate primary in Pennsylvania, featuring former TV doctor Mehmet Oz, who's running behind as of right now, but it's early. We're also keeping a close eye on a GOP House primary in North Carolina, where scandal-plagued incumbent Congressman Madison Cawthorn is trailing as of right now. We'll be right back after this quick break.
We've got a key race alert in North Carolina. There you see State Senator Chuck Edwards right now in the lead with 37.8%. Scandal-plagued Madison Cawthorn right now behind with 27.6%. As the votes continue to come in and be counted, we should point out that Senator Tom Tillis endorsed State Senator Chuck Edwards instead of Madison Cawthorn in this race. Let's go to Diane Gallagher at Cawthorn headquarters. Diane?
Yeah, and look, State Senator Chuck Edwards not only benefited from U.S. Senator Tom Tillis, but also more than 6 figures from that super PAC that is tied to Tillis that was dropped into attack ads against Cawthorn. We're seeing some of the fruits of that labor at this point. I spent time with State Senator Chuck Edwards, who said that he was investing a lot of time in his Senate seat here in North Carolina, which is Henderson County, where I am now, in Buncombe County, Transylvania County. And the early returns we're seeing coming in from there show that that may have paid off. We're looking in some places 2-1, even close to 3-1. Edwards over Cawthorn. Now, I do want to caution, this is just early voting totals. We have a long way to go here, but this is what Chuck Edwards wanted to see early in the night. This is what his campaign teams were working toward in this particular area where the population is centered in this district.
Dan Gallagher, appreciate that. I want to go to Manu Raju, who is standing by on Capitol Hill. Manu, I know a lot of people on Capitol Hill watching this race very closely in North Carolina.
Yeah, and actually encouraged by the results, something you typically don't see. Typically, Republicans and Democrats who have members of their own who are running for re-election, they quickly get behind that individual, but not with Madison Cawthorn. In fact, all the Republicans in the delegation, when we asked them, none of them said that they would actually support Cawthorn's re-election. One of them, you mentioned Tom Tillis. He told me this is the first time ever he has gotten behind someone, an opponent of a sitting Republican member of Congress, Richard Burr, who's the retiring Republican senator, also said to me earlier today that there was virtually no chance Republicans would welcome back Madison Cawthorn if he were to win today. So at the moment, Anderson, Republicans feeling good seeing one of their own potentially going down in the primary tonight. Anderson.
Manu Raju, appreciate it. Back with the panel here. You don't hear that very often, Chris, particularly these days, of so many Republicans who are serving Capitol Hill not wanting Madison Cawthorn back.
You know, if you had gone about the last 2 years trying to blow up your political viability, you could not have done a better job than Madison Cawthorn has done. I'm just looking down the bill of particulars here. He's been stopped 3 times by the police since October. He's been stopped by the TSA at checkpoints at airports with guns.
Right. I believe it was 1 gun and then a loaded magazine the first time.
Okay, yeah. I take your point. He's been photographed in women's lingerie.
If only he had gotten that out.
He's been photographed in sexually indiscreet or concerning videos. And maybe the thing that got him in the most trouble is that they had a redistricting, and he was going to go run in another district, and then they changed the district, and he had to go back to his district and say, oops, never mind, I really want to be representing you people. And as was just pointed out, the incumbent Republican senator of North Carolina, Tom Tillis, is not only actively opposing him, his super PAC has put $1.5 million into the race, saying that he's an embarrassment and a disaster. Other than that, it's been smooth sailing.
But here's the worst thing, I think, worse than all the stuff you were just talking about, is that he accused his colleagues of participating in sex orgies and using cocaine. And that was it. And Kevin McCarthy had to call him into his office, the Republican leader, and say, what is this about? And then he backed down and admitted that he had been lying. But that was the moment, I think, the dam broke, because he was talking about them.
In North Carolina.
Right, in Washington. That was it.
Yeah.
They were all
Although it does seem like he has alienated a lot of the people who supported him the first time around when he ran. A lot of people who have strong ties in North Carolina who made calls to their friends saying, hey, look, this is a guy you can
remember when he burst on the scene, he was an interesting story. He was a young guy. He had overcome an accident. And there was a lot of interest in him. But this has turned into, Madison Cawthorn's excellent adventure.
He also,
he's made a folly of this. And as you point out, once you accuse your colleagues, that's like a red line. They'll tolerate almost anything. But not that.
Right.
It was also interesting. I mean, early on when he was running, and even after he got elected, he was talking about reaching over across the aisle. He was sort of saying a lot of things which sounded like he was critical of the rhetoric coming out of Washington at the time he was elected, and then that went away.
He's a profoundly unserious person, and that's become apparent. I mean, even in a place where not everyone is a huge historic figure, he really stands out for the frivolousness of his behavior.
Interestingly enough, Donald Trump just came out and said we should give him a second chance. It appears that the voters in the 11th District of North Carolina may not give him a second chance. And this is one case where an incumbent might go down. And I think that the North Carolina Republican Party and the Republican Party nationally would breathe a huge sigh of relief.
Well, and he discovered, I think, you say he started out seriously, you think?
Well, I said
Maybe.
he was a person of interest.
Interest.
Yes.
Then he started hanging out with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Gates, and you could see what was happening, which is he was part of that in crowd, and they were pro-Trump all the way, and that is probably the only reason Donald Trump endorsed him. Yes. And there are lots of people in the Trump circle who thought it was crazy. Why would you do this? And Donald Trump's only reason is that he believed in the big lie and talked about it.
Well, he may be part of the out crowd now.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of uncertainty hanging over the very competitive GOP Senate primary in Pennsylvania. We're standing by for more results from that state and in all the key races. Stay with us.
And I have a key race alert for you right now for the Pennsylvania Senate race. On the Republican side, hedge fund CEO Dave McCormick remains in first place with 36.2% of the vote, about 4,500 votes ahead of Mehmet Oz, the TV doctor, who has 23.1% of the vote. And in third place, as of right now, Kathy Barnett, the radio firebrand, who has 17.2% of the vote. That's with only 2% of the estimated vote in, still a lot of votes to count. Now let's go to the Democratic side, where Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman remains in the lead with 51.8% of the vote, almost 35,000 votes ahead of Congressman Connor Lamb, who has 33.3% of the vote, and state legislator Malcolm Kenyatta, who is at 12.1% of the vote. That's with a little bit more of the vote in, about 16% there. Kristen Holmes is at McCormick headquarters in Pittsburgh. Kristen, what is the McCormick camp saying about this early lead?
Well, look, advisors here are still saying it's anyone's game, but they do see a path to victory for the former hedge fund CEO. They were unnerved last week when they saw this late surge from Kathy Barnett, believing it came from months of mudslinging between Oz and McCormick, really opening up a lane for Barnett to succeed. They decided to replicate this strategy, allow Oz and Barnett to tear each other apart and take McCormick out of it, hoping that he would have his own lane. Essentially what they did was they pulled most of his negative ads, replaced them with ads about hope and optimism for the country, biographical spots on his family. We saw McCormick all over the state, not once mentioning his opponents by name. And tonight, this is the night they see if this strategy shift worked.
All right, let's go to the Democratic Senate primary now in Pennsylvania. Jessica Dean is at the headquarters of frontrunner John Fetterman. And Jessica, the Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, he's in the hospital right now after getting a pacemaker implanted today. What's he doing as the results come in?
Well, we know I was just talking with a campaign spokesperson, and he told me that the lieutenant governor is recovering in his hospital room. His returns come in along with his dad, his brother, his campaign manager. So they're about 4 hours away from us. We're currently in Pittsburgh. We are expecting to hear from his wife, Giselle, and their children. They are here. But again, the lieutenant governor, not the night he thought he would be having in terms of where he thought he would be and how he would be taking all of this in. He is in that hospital room recovering from having the pacemaker put in earlier today. They say that it went very well, that he is expected to make a full recovery. This is after he suffered a stroke on Friday, Jake. That took him off the trail for the last 5 days, those key last days on the trail. But the campaign says they feel very good about where they stand tonight as they watch these returns come in.
All right, Jessica Dean, thanks so much. We'll have more results from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania after this quick break. Stay with us. And we have a key race alert for you from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Let's look at the Senate standings as of right now. On the Republican side, former hedge fund CEO Dave McCormick is up with 32.1% of the vote. He is about 5,600 votes ahead of Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz, endorsed by Donald Trump, who has 22.1% of the vote. Right now, carrying up the rear, Kathy Barnett with 19.3% of the vote. But that's only with 4% of the vote in as of now. But Dave McCormick right now in first place. Let's look at the Democrats. On the Democratic side, Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman still with a very healthy lead, 54.2% of the vote. He is more than 62,000 votes ahead of his closest challenger, Congressman Connor Lamb from the Pittsburgh area, who has 30.7% of the vote. bringing up the rear, State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta with 10.8% of the vote. Let's take a look at the Republican gubernatorial primary right now, with former U.S. Attorney Bill McSwain in the lead right now with 26.9% of the vote. He's about 5,700 votes ahead of businessman Dave White, who has 16.9% of the vote. Former Congressman Lou Barletta with 13.7% of the vote. And Doug Mastriano, one of the strongest Trump supporters in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, bringing up the rear with 12.5% of the vote. That is only with 4% of the estimated vote in right now. And John King, we should point out to our viewers, when you look at how much of the vote has come in, we're not even in the first inning of this game right now.
We are not. We are. If the first batter's up, maybe, however, whatever baseball metaphor, sports metaphor you want to use, we are early. And that's the number you just mentioned that's most important, talking about in the context of this is the Republican primary, about 4% of the vote counted so far. So if you're Dave McCormick, it's great to be ahead, although if you look at the Ohio Senate race, Nebraska governor's race, in the Republican primaries in both of those states, the candidate that opened up an early lead in both of those states came in third. Now, there's no way of knowing until we count more votes if that's going to happen. But if you're Dave McCormick, you're at 32%. As you said, a 5,600 vote and change lead over Dr. Oz. Kathy Barnett, the surprising conservative who was surging at the end, did she peak too soon? It's going to be a couple hours, Jake, before we get to that answer. But just looking at the map, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 counties where David McCormick is leading at the moment. One for Dr. Oz, that's Philadelphia County. It happens to be the biggest population center in the state, Philadelphia. And one, Kathy Barnett, in Montgomery County, in the suburbs out here. But again, look, leading with about 15% of the vote in this very important suburban area outside of Philly, 30%, 25, 18. That's what we'll be watching as we go through these counties. So you move over here to Bucks County, 31, 24, 19. So they're splitting the vote in the early vote as we come through it. And you're looking for anything regional at the moment. Obviously, Philadelphia is county number 1. Allegheny County, in terms of population, is county number 2. Here you do see McCormick with an edge. In this three-way race, as we've gone through these other primaries, you see how the vote is splitting. And in the population centers, you want a gap like that, if it holds up. It's only 12% of the vote. But you'd like a 20-point gap like that in a major population center because that gives you math. But, Jake, we all know this from the Trump experience. Pennsylvania is a very competitive state or commonwealth, and you see all these counties that are still gray. That's Trump country. That is rural Pennsylvania. So does the Trump endorsement matter? Does Kathy Barnett saying she's actually was Trump before Trump, if you will, and pushing those conservative positions or MAGA positions, does that work? And just if you're asking at home, why is that county white? Well, that's a tie. 87 to 87, 56 votes there. Clinton County, Pennsylvania, 56th out of the 67 counties in terms of the population center. Donald Trump won this county with 67%, 68% of the vote against Joe Biden a couple of years ago. So we'll watch how that plays out. It's a tie at the moment. That's why it's white compared to the other colors on the map. Long way to go.
Yeah, a long way to go, and I think any one of these three candidates could ultimately pull it out by the end. Take us down the Democratic race right now, because I think people would have anticipated a much more competitive race among the Democrats than we're seeing as of right now, at least.
At the beginning of the race, the answer to that was yes. Late in the race, there wasn't a ton of public polling here, or reliable polling anyway, but you did see the Lieutenant Governor, John Fetterman, with somewhere in the ballpark of a 25, 30-point lead in some of the polls that were released. That's ballpark where he is now, with about 22% of the vote counted. But again, we still have a long way to go. You mentioned Malcolm Kenyatta. He's a state legislator from the Philadelphia area, and you do see his green color here leading in Philadelphia at the moment. But let's just pop it up and see, only 18%. Philadelphia, the #1 by far population center in the Commonwealth, so this matters a ton. 18% in, and we'll watch it play out. But you see John Fetterman's color everywhere else, including out here. Allegheny County is interesting in the sense that you have in Connor Lamb and John Fetterman, two people whose political base is out here in the western part of the state. Connor Lamb's House district is essentially west of Pittsburgh, out toward the Ohio border. John Fetterman, before he was the lieutenant governor, was the mayor of Braddock, which is here, eastern suburbs of Allegheny County as you move back over. So if this would be, if you will, a fair fight, or both of their territory right there, Fetterman in Allegheny County, with almost half of the vote counted, 57 to 40, if you round up. So still a long way to go, but Fetterman led throughout this race. He led consistently going in, and despite the health questions at the end, as you watch the map fill in, again, a long way to go. But in the Democrat count, it's coming a little quicker, up to about 22%, 54 to 30. When you're looking at a crowded race, 54 to 31, if you round that up, that's the kind of gap you like if you're at Fetterman headquarters, but you still see a lot of math to do.
And Fetterman is more progressive than Connor Lamb. Connor Lamb, more of a moderate Democrat, at least that's how he casts himself. State Representative Kenyatta, clearly the true blue progressive in the race. Go back to Philadelphia for a second. I just want to see something, because if Kenyatta is to have any prayer, he needs to win Philadelphia outright. He just needs a stunner there. And look at that. Look how close that is.
Yeah, that's not going to do it. If you're going to have a shock, and look, we should open our minds, whether it's tonight or throughout this primary season. People are looking. We do see evidence in both parties that people are looking outside the box. You mentioned John Fetterman. You know, he is a progressive candidate, but he's also said, I want to fund the police, not defund the police. He's also unorthodox. He wears his hoodies. He's 6'3", 6'8", I think, or something. You know, he's a different candidate. But if you're Malcolm Kenyatta and you want a long shot upset, you need a bigger margin than that in your home area. But then it's only 18%, but 38 to 35 is not going to cut it. But it is interesting to see him cutting into the vote as we continue to count.
Absolutely. We're going to go back live to Pennsylvania as more votes come in from the Commonwealth. And the hot race of the night, of course, the Republican Senate primary. We still have no idea who's going to win that. Stay with us.
Welcome back to our special coverage. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Philadelphia. Take a look at this. We've got a key race alert. The Senate Republican primary here in Pennsylvania. Look at this. Dave McCormick, the former CEO of a hedge fund, he's ahead right now. He's ahead by almost 6,000 votes. He's got 32.1%. Dr. Mehmet Oz, 23.2%. Kathy Barnett, 19.7%. Dave McCormick is ahead right now, but only, 5% of the vote has been counted so far. So it's still early, but clearly they're encouraged over at Dave McCormick headquarters right now. Jeff Zeleny is joining us right now from Dr. Mehmet Oz headquarters here in Pennsylvania. Take us inside the campaign right now. What are you hearing? What are you seeing over there, Jeff?
Well, Wolf, throughout this campaign, Dr. Mehmet Oz has run his campaign as a talk show like he used to be, like he vaulted into celebrity status. He would race into the room. He would high-five his supporters. He would even pull people from the crowd to take checks of their blood pressure, asking them if they're worked up about what's happening in Washington. But, Wolf, tonight, this show has a very uncertain ending. I am told that Dr. Oz is watching early returns come in with his family. His supporters are just beginning to trickle into the room here. And one question still hangs over this race. A, did he prove himself as a true conservative, as former President Donald Trump said again and again in endorsing him? And did he prove himself as a true Pennsylvanian? Of course, he recently moved into the Commonwealth. So they are watching the key suburbs around Philadelphia, of course, but also into the middle stretches of the state. That, of course, is where the former president was very strong in 2020. Dr. Oz not expected to be as strong, but he certainly has to hold his own there. So tonight, an uncertain ending, at least to the Dr. Oz political show here in Bucks County, Wolf.
Yeah, it's still early. Only 5% of the vote is in. But Dave McCormick is ahead. He's got an impressive lead, at least so far. Let's discuss with Casey Hunt and Michael Smerconish, both Pennsylvania natives. What do you make of these early numbers?
I think there have been a number of momentum shifts in this Senate race. Initially, McCormick was ascendant. Then came the Trump endorsement of Oz. That caused a reevaluation. If Oz wins, it's only because of Donald Trump. Of that, I'm certain. And then, Wolf, you had Oz and you had McCormick spend $50 million battling one another. That allowed Barnett, because it was mutually assured destruction, to emerge out of nowhere, largely unvetted. In the 11th hour, all of a sudden, it's a three-way race. But now I think because of some of the things that have been revealed about her, there's yet another reevaluation. Maybe McCormick, again, has the momentum at the right time.
How do you see it, Casey?
I think Michael's absolutely right. I think one of the dynamics to watch here, and as we're looking at these early returns, let's be careful. Yes, McCormick has an early lead, but we're really waiting on the vote to come in from the rural counties. What we've seen is a lot of vote coming in from the Pittsburgh area, from the Philadelphia area. Those rural areas are really going to tell us whether or not this late Barnett surge is something that's really going to make a difference. Now, I have, some sources suggest that there were maybe a lot of undecided voters here at the end who didn't really like Oz. Maybe they were Trump inclined, but they weren't really into Dr. Oz, and Kathy Barnett gave them a sudden alternative at the end. And, I think the real question is going to be, does that last-minute focus on Barnett, does it actually push her down, or does it have the opposite effect? I think we've seen some of that.
If Barnett should pull this out, she has Donald Trump to thank because Donald Trump got into the gubernatorial race, came out for Mastriano because he was nervous he wasn't going to get a W in the Senate race. Mastriano and Barnett are joined at the hip. If Mastriano wins, maybe he pulls her across the finish line.
Is Dave McCormick the more establishment Republican candidate, someone that establishment Republicans think has the best chance to win the Senate contest?
I think so. When earlier in the night I said to you that the most electable candidates might not emerge from the primaries, I was thinking of Connor Lamb on the Democratic side of the aisle, and I was thinking of Dave McCormick on the Republican side of the aisle, because I think that they are the two strongest general election candidates.
You know, they're also the two most traditional candidates. If you put Connor Lamb and Dave McCormick next to each other,
right,
they look a lot like, they dress the same, they have the same type of mannerism, they have similar, you know, pedigreed backgrounds, the kind of traditional way that you would come into politics. And I think voters are just flat out rejecting that lately. They're looking for something else. And, you know, even in a Commonwealth, like Pennsylvania, where you get a lot of more middle of the road voters here, I think people are just tired of what
let's remind our viewers.
Right.
Let's remind our viewers how important potentially going into the next U.S. Senate this Senate primary is tonight. This Republican primary in Pennsylvania.
It's not a dramatic and inflated statement to say that control of the United States Senate may reside on exactly what happens in Pennsylvania, not just tonight, but in November as well. Yeah, it could all come down to the Commonwealth.
I think I would not be surprised, Wolf, if we're all sitting here having this same conversation about this Senate race come November.
This is the seat that Pat Toomey, the incumbent Republican, is giving up. He's not seeking
I think
re-election.
he saw this coming. I think that he saw this coming. He didn't want to play in this environment, probably worried about whether he could survive a primary, and that's where we are.
Yeah.
A lot of Republicans.
We'll watch it very closely. Yeah. Moments ago, we saw the early leader in the GOP Senate primary in Pennsylvania. We're talking about Dave McCormick. We're expecting more votes in that critical race at any moment now. Our special primary coverage will continue right after this.
Welcome back to CNN Election Night in America. We can now make a major projection. CNN projects that John Fetterman, the Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania, is the winner of Pennsylvania's Democratic Senate primary, beating his leading opponent, Congressman Connor Lamb. Fetterman locking up the nomination on the same day that he had a pacemaker implanted after suffering a stroke just days ago. Fetterman will face the winner of Pennsylvania's Republican Senate primary for the seat now held by retiring Republican Senator Pat Toomey. Let's go to Jessica Dean now, who's at Fetterman headquarters in Pittsburgh. Jessica, a very important day in the life of John Fetterman.
Yeah, he's had a lot happen in the last not even 12 hours, Jake. He had that pacemaker put in just a short time ago, coming out of that procedure at 6 p.m. It's now, roughly 9 p.m. on the East Coast, and they just found out here that John Fetterman is going to be the Democratic nominee for this Senate seat. It is an open Senate seat in Pennsylvania. It's where Democrats are really hoping to pick up a seat in the Senate and keep control of the Senate going into the 2022 midterms. But this crowd is very excited. We know that Fetterman is actually about 4 hours away. He's in Lancaster at his hospital room tonight, recovering from that procedure. He suffered a stroke on Friday. That took him off the trail for 5 days. We're told he's doing very well after his procedure, that he is expected to make a full recovery, that he will be hitting the campaign trail soon, Jake, but we're not exactly sure when soon will be. He still has to be released from the hospital, and his wife Giselle told me yesterday she wants at least a week of him getting extra rest beyond what the doctors are ordering him to do. Now, speaking of his wife, she is here with their children. We're expecting to hear from her in a little bit. She's going to be standing in as the candidate tonight. It's unclear if we'll be hearing from the Lieutenant Governor, whether virtually or a message of some sort, but we are expecting to hear from her wife as she thanks supporters here in Pittsburgh, where he thought he would be tonight, Jake, but instead he is now the Democratic Senate nominee from a hotel room in Lancaster. Jake.
All right, Jessica Dean and at Fetterman campaign headquarters. Let's go to Dana Bash and Abby Phillip. And Abby, you and I were talking about this earlier. Fetterman clearly the progressive candidate compared to Conor Lamb, but also difficult to pinpoint. And he's somebody who, politically at least, Democrats hope will be able to appeal to blue-collar voters in Pennsylvania who have been trending Republican now for some time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing to keep in mind here with Fetterman is that it's not going to be a sort of clear left, center, right type of dynamic with him. One thing that you hear a lot of voters talk about is that they like the guy. They think that he looks like one of them. They want to have a beer with him. How that factors into this race in a state that is going to be about cobbling together a coalition, the voters in the suburbs, in the collar counties, black voters, the voters in those rural counties, can he be competitive in those Trump areas? That's what remains to be seen. But I think the thing about Fetterman is not so much his positions on all of these policy ideas, but whether Democratic voters, based on how they voted tonight, think that he can resonate in a general election.
No, it's so true. We have been talking, understandably, because of the races we've been covering, about the sort of divide in the direction of the Republican Party. But this is a moment to look at the Democratic Party. And if you look at just the records, Conor Lamb, who lost, and John Fetterman, who we are projecting won this primary, you would say, oh, the progressive won against the more moderate candidate. And Conor Lamb is like textbook, the kind of moderate candidate that you would think that the Democratic Party would want to run, particularly in a purpley state like Pennsylvania. But the question is whether or not, just like you were saying, Abby, it's almost not irrelevant how progressive Fetterman's policies are, but second to the fact that people look at him as different, as outside the box, as Jake, as somebody who is truly authentic. And that authenticity is still the name of the game when it comes to politics, particularly now when people are just fed up.
Well, if he wants to continue the reputation of authenticity, let's bring in Dr. Jonathan Reiner. He's going to have to authentically disclose and be transparent about his health situation, because this is a very serious procedure to have a pacemaker and a defibrillator put into his chest.
Right, Jake. I think there are real questions about now the Democratic candidate's health, and if he is going to continue to be this sort of down-to-earth kind of persona in Pennsylvania, then I think he should be open about what's going on with his health. I don't think there's almost any medical condition which should preclude you from holding any kind of office. But he really needs to be honest with his constituents. And what I would do is I would bring on his medical team tomorrow and just simply let them answer the press's questions, put that behind them, and then he can take some time to recover and then move on with the campaign.
All right, Dr. Reiner, thanks so much. Anderson?
Jake, thanks very much. Back now with the team here in New York. Chris, I mean, John Fetterman, it's quite unusual to have the candidate be in a hospital room on election,
yes,
to say the least.
As opposed to being in a hotel room.
Yes.
Yeah, and obviously we're going to have to see how this plays out. We wish the lieutenant governor all the best. I will say I have to disagree slightly with the previous panel, because while his authenticity and down-to-earthness, if there's such a phrase, played very well in the Democratic primary, you get to a general election, particularly if you end up with a moderate like Dave McCormick, there are a lot of things that the Republicans are going to have to work with in going after John Fetterman. This is a guy who is against limits on abortion. He's for universal background checks. He wants to end the filibuster. He wants to legalize pot. And interestingly enough, for a progressive, he's also going to have an issue he's going to have to deal with the black community, because of the mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania in 2013. He was out one night and heard what he said was gunfire, and ended up confronting an unarmed black jogger with a shotgun. And nothing came of it. It turned out the fellow was unarmed. In fact, the man is now in jail, and he's endorsing Fetterman from jail. But you could understand how a Republican candidate could work with that to try to hurt Fetterman in the black community.
I think one of the concerns you hear from Democrats is how Fetterman will do in those suburban areas around Philadelphia that are so critical in Pennsylvania elections, and will he get the kind of vote that a Democrat needs to get out of that area? Because some of the things that make him more appealing, the unconventionality, as you point out, may not play as well in those areas. But I do think that when you look at the poll, the CNN poll that we heard earlier about how fundamentally jaundiced people are about politics, I do think what everyone has said, that authenticity and sort of unconventionality, this may be a year where that plays.
And that's
yeah, but issues matter too.
Sure. Yes, they do. Depends.
They do. And you could see a lot of people concerned. You could see the Republicans playing him as being hard on gun control, soft on abortion, a number of issues that would play very well.
Well, and that might work in his favor, depending on what the Supreme Court does. I mean, to me, what's so interesting about this particular race is that Conor Lamb, as I think Dana was saying, is sort of on paper the perfect candidate.
I agree.
The perfect candidate.
He was a Marine.
Yeah, everything.
Prosecutor.
He spent, $2.5 million, which normally would be okay. Fetterman spent $6 million. But he, in this focus group my pollster was telling me about, he doesn't come across as the fighter. And Casey is saying people are angry. Well, when you're angry, you want someone to fight for you. And I think that Fetterman seems like somebody who's going to fight for you. He's a big guy.
Does his health become an issue that would be brought up by his opponent in a campaign like this?
No, I don't think his opponent would bring it up. And I honestly think by November, this thing should maybe in the rear view mirror. And I don't know how it affects a Senate race in the way that it might affect a race for another office. But, the interesting thing about what you said, Gloria, is there were a lot of people who wanted the Democratic establishment in Washington to pour money into the Conor Lamb campaign. And they came to the conclusion relatively early that they didn't think he could beat Fetterman in a primary, and they didn't do it.
And they were right.
Let's check back in with Wolf. Wolf?
Anderson, I want to bring in Casey Hunt and Michael Smerconish. They've been watching this very closely. Let's first of all talk about Fetterman. You've covered this candidate for a long time. Tell us about him.
Well, a lot has already been said that I think is accurate. A few things that I think I would add to the mix. First of all, I wish him Godspeed and a full recovery. He did have the stroke on Friday and not reveal it until Sunday in the final week of the campaign. I think there's a question there as to whether they should have been immediately forthcoming. I don't know that it would have altered anything, but I just wish there had been immediate candor in that regard. Chris Wallace referenced the incident in 2013 with the unarmed black jogger. Conor Lamb never really went there, certainly didn't go there.
Hold on one moment. I just want to point out, take a look at this. Doug Mastriano is winning right now in the governor's Republican primary contest in Pennsylvania. This is a significant development. 10% of the vote is in, and he's ahead, by almost 15,000 votes, 30.8% to Lou Barletta's 20.2%. It doesn't mean it's necessarily going to stay that way, Michael and Casey, but it's a significant moment. What does it say?
Well, I think certainly the Pennsylvania Republicans I've talked to, and Michael, I'm confident you'd back me up here too. This is a nightmare for the Republican Party to have Doug Mastriano potentially winning this race. And that's because, he was at the Capitol or rather I should say he was at the Stop the Steal rally on January 6th. He and Kathy Barnett are tied together. Donald Trump, of course, jumped in for him at the 11th hour over the weekend, basically trying to hedge his bets against, in case Dr. Oz, who he endorsed in the Senate race, actually loses. But I haven't talked to anyone in the state who, if you talk to people who want to see Republicans get elected in the state, who want to see Doug Mastriano in the governor's office.
I think that former President Trump panicked about what was going on in the Oz-McCormick-Barnett race, came out for Mastriano where he probably otherwise would not have. I happen to believe that if he'd come out for Lou Barletta, by the way, one of the most loyal members as a congressman, was among the first, if not the first, to come out for Donald Trump. Trump, instead of going with Barletta, went with Mastriano and arguably sealed the deal for Mastriano.
He also suspected that Mastriano was going to win, and he wanted to be with the winner.
Absolutely. Wanted to make sure that he left Pennsylvania with at least one W tonight.
Yeah.
And, Wolf, one thing, just to bring this back to Fetterman also, the Gloria and Chris Wallace were talking a lot about, whether Fetterman can pull this out. I think one of the key questions, and this is why we're so interested in the Republican Senate primary, is who is Fetterman going to be running against? Because in a state like Pennsylvania, it's much different for Fetterman to face someone like David McCormick than it would be for him to face Kathy Barnett. And if he's got Doug Mastriano to run against in the governor's race, I think that helps him.
I want to make clear that a lot needs to be vetted among all of these candidates going forward that did not come out in the primaries.
It'll all come out in the general election.
Absolutely.
That's for sure. Anderson, back to you.
Well, thanks very much. I want to talk to here with our political team. David Urban, if Doug Mastriano wins as a Republican, what does that mean in that state?
Look, it's obviously, like Michael said, it's going to be challenging, right? Doug Mastriano, patriotic guy.
I think Nightmare was the term, or maybe that was Casey Hunt. I'm not sure.
Well, listen, he's obviously a patriotic guy. Served his country with honors in the military, right? But again, he's way too conservative for Pennsylvania general election, and he's going to lose. Josh Shapiro is an incredibly popular.
You think he would lose against Shapiro?
I think Josh Shapiro will do extremely well, and he'll lose. He'll beat him. Yeah, I do.
Josh Shapiro won twice as.
Josh Shapiro's had basically every public office you can have in the state of Pennsylvania. Right? He's wildly popular in the Philly suburbs, which where all the voters are. Right, and so he'll do extremely well, and Mastriano will lose, and that's the fear, is he'll drag the ticket down. Right, and it'll impact races like the old Charlie Dent seat. Right, or there are a few other competitive seats that are run right now, and the fear is that those seats will not be competitive with Doug Mastriano at the top of the ticket, right? Come November.
Look, I mean, your definition of patriotism is strange to me. I mean, he was there at the insurrection. Some people say he actually breached the police lines and stuff like that. So I think it says something very awful about where the Republican Party is, if this is who they want. When the insurrection happened, we were here in this room, and we thought there's a small number of nuts who have gone way too far, and now you have millions of Americans who were voting for the same kind of ideas and, in Pennsylvania tonight, the same kind of action. That's not good for the country. It's certainly not good for the Republican Party.
Well, just to be clear, I'm not lauding his activities on January 6th. I'm saying he served his country honorably as a military officer and a colonel. Obviously, so just let's be clear.
But not to get too insider baseball, but what's interesting about the last-minute Trump-Mastriano endorsement is I've heard from some folks saying he thinks that he's going to lose on the Dr. Oz endorsement. So he wanted to come out with one primary victory tonight, which is why that kind of last-minute 11th hour endorsement came. So he may get that initial win as he did tonight. But yeah, he does not stand a chance, in my view, in a general election. It's going to be very challenging.
And Trump's right now having a bad night in terms of, McCormick might pull it off. That's not good for Trump. Madison Cawthorn might go down. And then so this is
still early.
Still early. I'm just saying.
Well, I'm excited down here.
We now know who the Democratic Senate candidate will be in Pennsylvania, who will John Fetterman face in November. The Republican Senate nomination is still up for grabs. More results after the break.
And we have some key race alerts for you now. CNN's Election Night in America. Take a look at this in the Senate Republican primary. Former hedge fund CEO Dave McCormick still in the lead with 31.9% of the vote. He's almost 7,000 votes ahead of Mehmet Oz, the TV doctor who has Trump's endorsement with 28.2%. In third place as of right now, firebrand Kathy Barnett, who has 22.1% of the vote. Again, McCormick in the lead right now by about 7,000 votes with only 14% of the vote in. Still a lot of votes to count in the Senate Republican primary in Pennsylvania. Let's look at the gubernatorial primary right now, and look at that. Doug Mastriano, who is Trump endorsed, has taken a strong lead. He has now 35.8% of the vote, more than 26,000 votes ahead of former Congressman Lou Barletta, who has 21.7% of the vote. Bill McSwain, the former U.S. attorney, has 17.1% of the vote. Businessman Dave White, 9.5% of the vote. Doug Mastriano, the Trump-endorsed candidate, has skyrocketed ahead of the competitors, although there is still only 13 or now 14% of the vote that has been counted. Still a lot of votes to count. Let's go down to North Carolina now, if we can, where you see incumbent Congressman Madison Cawthorn has closed the gap with State Senator Chuck Edwards, who is still in the lead. Chuck Edwards, he has 33.9% of the vote. He's about 1,700 votes ahead of incumbent Congressman Madison Cawthorn, who has 31.6% of the vote. A lot more of the vote has been counted in North Carolina's 11th congressional district. 70% of the vote has been counted there. And a reminder, the rules here in this primary race is that if no candidate gets above 30%, they have a runoff. If both get above 30%, then whoever wins gets to obviously wins. And then if one candidate's above 30% and one's under 30%, the one that's over 30% wins. But Madison Cawthorn needs to get over 30% of the vote plus one in order to avoid a runoff. So right now, Madison Cawthorn fighting back with about 30% of the vote to go. John King at the Magic Wall, you're looking at Pennsylvania right now. How did Barletta jump ahead? Not Barletta, I'm sorry, Mastriano. How did Mastriano jump ahead as he did so quickly as these votes came in the last few minutes?
It's fascinating to look at, especially when you compare it to the Republican Senate primary, which we'll do in just a minute. Key to remember, just 15% of the vote in a big state, the big Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, a long way to go. And, Jake, not much vote in over here. About 30% of the vote is Philadelphia and the suburban collar around it, known for more Democrats in November, but a lot of Republicans in those areas. So we have a ways to go. But how did Doug Mastriano jump to the lead in the race, where he's up now? You look, 21%, Lou Barletta to 40% if you round that up, 39,000 plus votes. That's a big lead in a crowded primary. Still a long way to go. Look at it out here, right? And what makes this clear? Look at the middle of the state, right? Let's go back to 2020 in the presidential race. This is Trump country. These are small rural counties, some of them not very populous, but this is where Donald Trump makes the state competitive. Trump lost to Biden by 81,000 votes. He beat Hillary Clinton by a very narrow margin 4 years before that. He does it by running it up here. The Democrats get the votes in the population center. Trump country is rural Pennsylvania. Trump country is rural America. So you come back now to the governor's race. What's happening? That endorsement is clearly helping Doug Mastriano in these rural counties in the state. Still a long way to go, though, as we count the votes. You do see Bill McSwain, the former U.S. attorney, is leading in Allegheny County. It's pretty tight. They're splitting the vote, but he has a lead there. And then you come over to the eastern part of the state. Again, if you look at Philadelphia right now, this is Montgomery County, just outside of Philadelphia, 15% of the vote. Into Philadelphia proper, 11% of the vote. Let's look at Bucks County, 12% of the vote. So we have some major population centers, Jake, that are slower to report their votes. So we have a ways to go. But you do see that big jump, and that is proof positive on the map when you compare them. Trump's endorsement, without a doubt, helping Doug Mastriano for now. Lou Barletta in a distant second place. Long way to go, but that was a big switch for Mastriano, who started the night off more slowly. And again, look at this part of the state, right? Think of the governor's race. Remember all this pink for Mastriano right here. Then you come to the Republican Senate primary, and you have more of a split. You have Dave McCormick still leading in some of these counties. Look how close this is, 31.7, so round it up, 32 to 29 to 23. This is getting closer as we get more votes in. And you see some for Barnett in these rural counties. Again, she does not have the Trump endorsement, but she says she was MAGA before Trump, if you will. But look again, 33, 26, 26. Or 27 if you round up McCormick there. Move one county over. So these are small counties. This is 28th largest county in the state. It's not as tiny as some of the others. 30, 27, 25. So you have a split Republican field. They are fracturing the vote as you go through on the Senate Republican side, up to 17%. This is an interesting map which tells us two things. It's a very competitive primary, and we're going to be at this a while. Same point in the governor's race. A lot of votes to be counted. About 30% of the state population lives right here in the east, where Jake Tapper is from, and we got a long way to go.
So that the Senate primary, it's still just a horse race between those three. Go back to the gubernatorial results right now, if you could. And again, we're still just a minority of the votes have been counted. But this is exactly what Republican leaders were worried about. Many Republican leaders in Pennsylvania were worried that Doug Mastriano is too extreme to win in November. So there has been a big push to get everyone else out of the race except for one challenger against Mastriano. That didn't happen. They have two, and right now you have McSwain and Barletta, and not that Barletta is any moderate, but McSwain and Barletta splitting the anti-Mastriano vote, because Mastriano has been in the lead for months now.
Right, and so it is a fascinating conversation and a statement about today's Republican Party, where you're talking about Republicans saying Lou Barletta, who is a very conservative candidate, look at his record on immigration and other issues, that he was the mainstream. They were trying to get mainstream Republicans to be for Barletta because they were worried that Mastriano was even further. I'm not even sure right is the right word anymore. We say the more conservative candidate. That's not fair to anti-tax, smaller government conservatives, because a lot of these Trumpy candidates in these Republican primaries are not conservatives as we used to define conservatives. But Doug Mastriano is the Trump candidate in the race, and you're right. They tried to get some of these other candidates in the end. Dave White's getting 9% of the vote. The businessman, McSwain, getting 16% of the vote. The question is, is it split enough that this guy goes across the finish line? Again, a long way to go, but without a doubt, in the middle of the state where Trump proved to us you win a ton of votes here, it offsets some losses elsewhere. For now, it looks good, but again, it's a big state. There's a lot of counting to do.
Yeah, and just to remind people, one of the reasons why this is so important is that the governor of Pennsylvania appoints the Secretary of State, who then supervises the elections. Doug Mastriano is not somebody who, I think it's fair to say, can be relied upon to preserve democracy and the integrity of the vote. He has been one of the strongest election liars, one of the strongest supporters of Trump's big lie about the election in Pennsylvania. So that's why so many Republicans don't want him to be the nominee for many reasons. All eyes are on the Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth, and those two big outstanding Republican races for Senate and for governor. This primary night is still unfolding. More votes being counted. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Let's get a key race alert. Let's look in Pennsylvania with 22% of the vote in. You have McCormick at 31.9%, Dr. Mehmet Oz at 29.5%, and Kathy Barnett at 22.9%. Also now in the race for governor in Pennsylvania, you have Doug Mastriano at 41.2%, Lou Barletta at 22.2%, Bill McSwain at 15.1%, and Dave White at 8.2%, again with 22% of the vote now in. Let's go to Melanie Zanona at Mastriano headquarters in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. So, Melanie, as Mastriano takes the lead, how is Trump's influence being felt within the campaign?
Well, Doug Mastriano is running to be the Pennsylvania governor in 2022, but he has made his campaign all about 2020. He has really made lies about the 2020 election a cornerstone of his campaign. He was in Washington on January 6th for the Stop the Steal rally, and he has been leaning into the big lie here tonight. In fact, moments ago, he had Jenna Ellis, a former Trump lawyer, up on stage. Jenna Ellis and Doug Mastriano were two leading figures in the effort to overturn the election, and they both have been subpoenaed by the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Now, it's worth reminding viewers at home that the governor of Pennsylvania is going to appoint the Secretary of State, who will oversee the state's election process. So the stakes here are incredibly high. That is one of the reasons why some Republicans here are also privately panicking over the prospect of Mastriano winning the nomination. They worry he is too extreme for the general election. Some of them are starting to blame each other behind the scenes. So we'll see what happens later tonight. Anderson.
Now let's go to the White House, where President Biden is monitoring the primary results. Our Caitlin Collins is there. The president's reacting to John Fetterman's Senate primary win in Pennsylvania. Caitlin.
Yeah, Anderson, obviously the White House is watching this closely, especially what was going to happen in Pennsylvania, though Fetterman was widely expected to win. And the president is already previewing what the message is going to look like, no matter who it is that John Fetterman is running against when it comes to the Republican side of this, as we still wait to see what the results in that are going to look like. And he says that he does believe Fetterman can win in November. And the reason he says that, Anderson, is because while we await the results of the GOP primary, one thing is clear: these candidates are not your father's GOP. They have fought a malicious, chaotic primary campaign to be the most extreme, and they have shown people their authentic selves, that whoever emerges will be the dangerous, too craven, and too extreme to represent Pennsylvanians in the United States Senate. Anderson, that goes back to this message that you've heard emanating from the White House in recent days, as the president has invoked this term ultra MAGA that he has been using to describe the party, something the White House believes is going to be a negative point for them to use, though, of course, loyalists of the former president say they believe that that is not the dig that the White House thinks it is. But it does show you that the way the White House is going to frame this, no matter if it's Dave McCormick who wins, Dr. Oz, or, of course, Barnett in this race in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Caitlin Collins of the White House, thanks. We'll check in with you a little bit later. Van Jones, is this Democratic line going to work in Pennsylvania?
I don't know if it's going to work, but it's an authentic thing. I do think that Democrats are looking at a Republican Party and with a lot of fear. This is not, we say it's not your father. This is not a normal party at all. To have the idea that a Mastriano, who was a part of the insurrection, could be the governor of a state, appoint the Secretary of State to overturn the election results, that's even possible in America, is shocking. And I think the president is authentically trying to sound that alarm. He's trying to raise the stakes a little bit, because if you just say, well, I'm mad, I'm frustrated, I don't like gas prices, I'm going to sit home, you could lose your democracy. And I think the president wants people to know that.
So again, let's just remember, it's a Republican primary. It's not the general election, right? So I wouldn't get too carried away about it. And we'll see. We got a lot of election going on still here. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see if Doug Mastriano wins and Dave McCormick wins. What message does that send, right? Because clearly they're two completely different candidates.
We should point out you're a donor.
No, I'm a supporter, donor, friend.
You've given advice to them as well.
Of Dave McCormick.
What does it say to you that he is in the lead right now? I mean, there was a lot of talk about Kathy Barnett coming up. That maybe seems to have been somewhat overblown, although, again, it's very early, 22%.
Look, again, Anderson, I think Pennsylvanians are smart. They want to elect the most conservative person that can win in the fall. And in the Senate race, it's clear. I think it's much clearer in a Senate race where there's less candidates. There were 14 candidates in the governor's race to begin with, right? Down to still a pretty big stable. In the Senate race, it really came down to these three candidates. And Dave McCormick was the most authentic, the most conservative that people think can win in the fall. And I think that's what we're seeing right now.
But what's interesting with Mastriano and the Trump endorsement there is it has bearings for 2024. If this is a winnable potential pickup for the GOP in Pennsylvania, and if he endorsed somebody who, in my opinion, does not have a shot, that could end up hurting Trump's viability in 2024. And you've seen other potential candidates back others in this race. But I think the question, to Van Jones's point, is Crazy going to win tonight, respectfully? And I think the fact that McCormick is actually ahead shows that the voters may be more animated by what looks like competent leadership, somebody who has the experience to take on the issues, inflation, economy, et cetera, that are really animating voters. There was a lot of buzz around Barnett, but it looks like she's trailing at this point. So I think we will see where this goes.
I like that you say crazy. Respectfully. I'm not sure. But the fact that, Dr. Oz was endorsed by Trump. Why do you think that was?
Well, listen, candidates matter. I think the president looked at Dr. Oz and saw a lot of himself, right? Here's a very successful television, very successful television personality, very successful businessman. I think the president saw a lot of that. I think you had a lot of folks around the president advising him, maybe giving him some bad advice on that endorsement, in my opinion. I think the president already sat that one out or endorsed Dave McCormick here in the race. But I think he saw a lot of himself in Mehmet Oz, and he decided to go with him.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Can the leaders in Pennsylvania maintain their lead? We're going to go to the Magic Wall. John King when we come back.
Joining us right now, Giselle Barretto Fetterman. She is the wife of Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. Mr. Fetterman, of course, the projected Democratic Senate nominee in Pennsylvania. And she is at campaign headquarters in Pittsburgh, although her husband is in the hospital right now in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. First of all, Second Lady Fetterman, thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations. Obviously, most important right now, what can you tell us about your husband? What can you tell us about your husband's condition? How is he feeling? He had a fibrillator and a pacemaker put inside him today.
Yes, he is a bionic man now. He's feeling great. The surgery was perfect, and he is impatient, and he is just ready to get back on the ground, but I am not letting him just yet.
When do doctors expect him, not you, I understand your cautiousness, and you're the one that made him go to the hospital on Friday, so kudos to you for that. But when do doctors expect him to be well enough to leave the hospital, and when do they think he'll be well enough to campaign?
I don't have that date yet. They said it a couple days, but they didn't give me a firm date yet. He was under observation today after the surgery today. The surgery was great. I think they'll just watch him, and then hopefully we'll have a firm date when I get him home.
So your husband won his race today. He obviously has a long campaign ahead of him before the election in November. Do you think his condition is going to affect his ability to campaign?
I don't. You know, the more I learn about the procedure he's had, you know, over 1 million Americans have this done every year. They lead great lives. I'm confident that he'll be able to perform his job and do a great job and continue to do so.
I know this is all very sudden and you were dealing with it in real time, but I know you understand the need for voters to know exactly how he's doing. Do you think the campaign has been completely transparent, and can we expect, can the voters of Pennsylvania expect your husband and his doctor to come and answer any questions that reporters might have?
Absolutely, they can. I feel that we've done a great job. I mean, we turned around the news in under 48 hours. My kids knew just right before the rest of the world did. And we've been open and transparent through the whole thing. We'll continue to be. The exciting news to share is that surgery was perfect, and he's well on the road to full recovery.
It's still early. We still don't know who's going to win the Republican Senate primary in Pennsylvania. Is there a candidate that your husband would rather run against? Dave McCormick, Mehmet Oz, or Ms. Barnett?
No, I think we'll wait to see what we're up against, and we'll prepare to continue the trail and continue working for Pennsylvania until November.
Your husband in the past, he called himself a progressive. Now he says he's not a progressive. He claims he's also not a moderate. How do you think his pitch will be to voters? Policy issues, obviously very important. As you know, Pennsylvanians, like so many Americans across the country, worried about inflation, worried about health care prices, worried about health care access. What is his pitch going to be? Why should voters vote for him?
Because he's someone who listens. He's someone who wants to understand your issues. Whether you voted for him now or not, he wants to be a senator for all of Pennsylvania. So he really cares about people, and he wants to understand what your needs are, what your priorities are. And, you know, the label of progressive or not, the things he's running now are the same things he ran back then when they called him a progressive. Now it's where the party has shifted. I think he's someone who's always has been able to shift the needle on issues, and I think he'll continue to do that. He is passionate about the work that he does. He works on tough issues, and he slowly moves the needle so that he gets others on board on this work.
The Second Lady of the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Giselle Fetterman, congratulations again. I know it's been a wild roller coaster of a few days for you and your family, but congratulations on the hard-fought victory this evening.
Thank you so much, Jake.
And we're all praying for him and wishing him well. And before you go, bring her back for 1 second.
Thank you so much.
How are your kids doing before you go? How are your kids? Are they dealing with this all okay? I know it's tough. You got 3 little kids.
They are. I mean, you know, we're a family like any other family that will have a health scare, that will face it and keep going. The kids are involved in everything. They kept them in the loop. They know what's happening. They've been to see Daddy. They were excited to see how good he looked, and they know that he's going to be back out soon. So it is a little hard time for our family, but we'll be back together soon again.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us on this evening. It's got to be a wild day for the Fettermans. We're watching the race for the Republican nominee who will face off against Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, and of course the critical Republican race for Pennsylvania governor as well. We're going to dig into the results at the Magic Wall with Mr. John King. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Caution. Vehicle electrified. Contact results in rapid heart rate, shortness of breath, and a tingling in the extremities. Serious thrills may occur. The all-electric AMG EQS.
Open Talenti and raise the jar to gelato made from scratch. Raise the jar to all 5 layers. Raise the jar to the best gelato you've ever tasted. Talenti, raise the jar.
Hey, Dad. That smell is 8 million odor-causing bacteria. Good thing adding Lysol laundry sanitizer kills 99.9% of bacteria that detergents can't. Clean is good, sanitized is better.
Sheldon,
Good to see you. I can see you're upset, but when we said ditch the shells, we were talking about pistachios, not you.
Oh, you mean these pistachios? Oh, no, you look upset. You okay, John?
Can we get some arugula, please?
We need to reduce plastic waste in the environment.
That's why at America's beverage companies,
our bottles are made to be remade.
Not all plastic is the same.
We're carefully designing our bottles to be 100% recyclable, including the caps.
They're collected and separated from other plastics,
so they can be turned back into material that we use to make new bottles.
That completes the circle and reduces plastic waste.
Please help us get every bottle back.
There he is.
There he is.
Combining your stuff is hard. Combining your TV with Dish? Easy. Prime Video. Live TV and streaming apps all in one place with Dish.
What if you could use retirement accounts to invest in crypto? With iTrust Capital, you can. iTrust Capital allows you to invest in your favorite crypto assets 24/7 with the tax benefits of an IRA. So instead of paying taxes on your crypto gains every year, you can defer taxes till you retire using an iTrust IRA. Or with an iTrust Roth IRA, you can withdraw tax-free at retirement because you're in this for the long haul. Start investing today at itrustcapital.com.
Bathfitter doesn't just fit your bath. We fit your life. When you're tired of looking at your tired old bath, we fit your style with hundreds of design options. When a normal day is anything but normal, we fit your schedule with our unique tub-over-tub process installed in as little as a day. When high quality is the only quality that matters, we fit your standards with a lifetime guarantee. Bathfitter, it just fits. Visit bathfitter.com to book your free consultation.
I love being outside. My eyes, not so much. Until I found new Clear Eyes Allergy. Just one drop means all-day relief, and my eyes feel amazing. New Clear Eyes Allergy. Your eyes deserve the best.
Why is Roger happy? It's the little things Carvana does. See, Roger wants to sell his car, stat. Little things like getting a real offer in 2 minutes really make Roger happy. So does Carvana's customer advocate, Caitlin, picking up his car at promptly 10 a.m.
Hi, are you Roger?
Berglund, with the Honda Accord? Yes, I am. It's right over there. Will I be getting... And he loves that Caitlin pays him on the spot. Yep, Raj, it's the little things that drive you happy. We'll drive you happy at Carvana.
Upgrade to our redesigned oil warmer. Our latest device optimizes airflow to fill your space with lasting fragrance inspired by the sense of nature you love. Airwick, connect to nature.
It's election night in America, and CNN can now make a major projection. CNN projects that Doug Mastriano is the winner of the Pennsylvania Republican primary for governor. Mastriano, who received President Trump's endorsement, is a very vocal advocate of Trump's bogus efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Mastriano prevails in a crowded primary race. He will go on to face Democrat Josh Shapiro, the current Attorney General, in the fall. And Dana and Abby, it is hard to overstate how significant this is. We now have the Republican nominee for governor of Pennsylvania, somebody who has been one of the most full-throated supporters of Donald Trump's lies about the 2020 election, somebody who actually supported not counting the votes of Pennsylvania voters in 2020. I don't know that we've ever had something like this and a dynamic like this, where you have a nominee for governor who will, of course, appoint the Secretary of State in charge of the state elections, who has a position of having wanted to disenfranchise all of his Commonwealth's voters in the previous presidential election.
Right. There are Republicans who are going along with Donald Trump's election lies because they see it as advantageous to their candidacies or to their hold on power if they're here in Washington. And there are those who were in it from the jump. And that is exactly who Doug Mastriano, who CNN is projecting to be the nominee for governor in Pennsylvania, is. And all you have to do is look at frankly, the Johnny-come-lately Donald Trump endorsement just this past weekend. He explicitly said that it's because Mastriano, in his words, revealed the deceit, corruption, and theft of 2020 in the presidential election, which is bogus. That statement is bogus, but that's what Donald Trump led with. And one of the subplots here, in addition to the most important storyline, which is what Jake said, which is that this is a guy who is going to be up for the top job, the top executive job in Pennsylvania, a critical purple state. But the other subplot is the Donald Trump endorsement. By all accounts, and talking to Trump sources, Donald Trump endorsed him at the, sort of the late end of the campaign because he saw him heading towards the finish line and he wanted to jump on that.
Yeah, and against the, the advice of a lot of people around him
Yes.
who wanted him to endorse someone else. I keep coming back to a number from the polling that David Chalian was talking about tonight, which is the 53% of Pennsylvanians who said they were burned out by politics. And I can't help but think that one of the reasons why might be these election lies, might be the kind of vitriol and the infighting. And when you're looking at this race and you're looking at the contrast that's before voters, one of the reasons Republicans are so worried about Mastriano is because he kind of embodies a lot of that politics that I think a lot of voters are over it, whether they call themselves Democrats or Republicans. A lot of voters actually just want to move on from that kind of politics. And as you pointed out, he's pretty deep in it. He was subpoenaed by the January 6th committee. He was in Washington on January 6th for the Stop the Steal rally. He wanted to propose policies that would literally have allowed the state of Pennsylvania to appoint their own electors and disregard the will of the voters. So the reason you're seeing so much alarm among Republicans is because he is as far down in those partisan rabbit holes as you can be. And if voters want a break from that, either a break to not think about it or a break cleanly from that kind of politics, they're not going to get it with that kind of choice. And that's the opportunity for Democrats here in this race.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, does it mean that this race is over? Absolutely not. I mean, we have seen in two elections that the Trump ideals are very strong, but it certainly is going to be very, very tough for Republicans.
Anderson?
We continue to talk about the races in Pennsylvania with Mastriano now declared the winner of the Republican primary. David Axelrod, what does a Mastriano-Shapiro race look like?
Well, probably more favorable for a Democrat than in most places in the country. Josh Shapiro is a really popular Democrat, really popular office holder, I should say, in Pennsylvania, primarily because he is seen as a moderate and he works the state really, really hard, has a personal relationship with voters. And now he's got the contrast he wanted. As I mentioned earlier, they spent millions of dollars basically helping Mastriano get elected by calling him the Trumpiest of Trump candidates. And so
they were running commercials.
They were running commercials basically mentioning all of the positions that would actually excite the Republican base.
So they wanted to run against Mastriano.
They wanted to. Now, what you can't account for is the nature of the year, right, which could be very hard for Democrats. But I will say this, I would look for a lot of prominent Republicans to distance themselves from Mastriano and some to endorse Shapiro in this race now because he is so far from what a Pennsylvania candidate should look like. This is a swing state. This is a state that very closely divided, and I think Shapiro is in tonight. Pretty good shape.
Say is, if you're the Republicans in Pennsylvania, and not in that ballroom with Mastriano, you're pretty unhappy because this was a state that in the midterms in this year, 2022, that you thought you had a real chance of taking. It's been the Democratic Governor Tom Wolf, for 2 terms now, and particularly you look ahead to 2024, nobody's going to win the presidency without winning Pennsylvania, and suddenly the odds are much better that the Democrat wins. The Democrat appoints the Secretary of State and presides over the election. So Republicans cannot be happy. If it were Lou Barletta, the former congressman, or Bill McSwain, the U.S. attorney, who incidentally Trump did an anti-endorsement of because he did not fight hard enough after the 2020 election, you got to be pretty unhappy. This is the last person you wanted to see get the nomination.
Lou Barletta, who was more electable, came out this weekend after Trump did his 11th hour endorsement because he wanted somebody whom he thought he could win, came out and said, where's the loyalty about Donald Trump? And that was sort of stunning to me because I'm sort of like, are you kidding? Where's the loyalty? Lou Barletta was one of the first people to endorse Donald Trump. He has been out there for him. Perhaps, you know, he wasn't on, you know, at the January 6th rally or leading a group there. But, you know, if you would have thought if Donald Trump had any loyalty to someone, it would have been Lou Barletta.
Yeah, Mastriano was going to win the race.
Right.
Well, that's why he did it.
Exactly.
He took out Oz Insurance. He began to worry about whether Dr. Oz could get over the finish line. He wanted a winner. Mastriano looked like he was going to win, so he threw Barletta overboard.
Let's go back to Wolf. Wolf?
We just got a statement from Josh Shapiro, who's going to be the Democratic nominee for the governorship of Pennsylvania. And we're waiting for Doug Mastriano. He's about to speak there. We'll hear what Mastriano has to say shortly. We'll hear what he's saying. We're about to project that. Let's talk a little bit about this upcoming contest, Shapiro, Mastriano.
Josh Shapiro got exactly what he wanted. How do we know that? He ran a television commercial. They played it extensively on Fox, where he touted things that conservatives would have appreciated about Mastriano. He's against abortion. He wants to end mail-in balloting, but in a very clever way that delivered a message to independents and Democrats that said, this guy is a problem. The happiest person in Pennsylvania tonight is Shapiro.
What do you think?
First, I think he's absolutely right. I mean, I cannot find a Republican. I've been trying to talk to a number of them who is excited about the fact that Mastriano is projected to win this race, because, you know, for a lot of these reasons that Chris Wallace and David Axelrod were discussing, which is to say that this was an opportunity for Republicans to take back a governorship that they haven't had in a year that is going to be tough for Democrats because of inflation and the president's approval rating. And certainly the Republicans I'm talking to think they've blown that chance.
Mastriano and Shapiro, you can't pick two different people. Their views are totally different on so many issues.
Wolf, can I say something that may sound a little nutty? I'm happy that we're able to watch what's going on in Mastriano headquarters. That may sound odd, but he had his final rally this weekend in my native Bucks County, Pennsylvania, he and Barnett. They wouldn't let the media in the room. It was a public event for their supporters, and they said to the media, you're not permitted to walk in. I have no idea what this general election is going to look like.
It's un-American. I mean, the reality is that we, reporters and the public have a right to know what their candidates are saying. And I think, to your point, it underscores all of the other themes around him. The fact that he was at the Stop the Steal rally on January 6th. Kathy Barnett, who he endorsed, they endorsed each other, was also there. It's a different level of the kind of politics that we've been seeing. I mean, yes, there are a lot of other MAGA candidates who are taking steps in that direction, but they are so far on the edge of it. I think that's what you're hearing.
I think it also speaks to the weakness of the parties. They couldn't get those other candidates to drop out. They couldn't endorse. They couldn't coalesce around someone. If Mastriano were in a one-on-one against one of the others, I think he would have been defeated. It also speaks, as I said earlier tonight, to...
There he is.
There you go.
He's about to speak. He's obviously a very happy guy right now. He's projected to be the Republican gubernatorial candidate. We'll watch this as soon as he starts speaking.
Yeah, and we should underscore here, Wolf, that while we have projected that he's going to win, the rest of the field was very split. I mean, this is the hardcore kind of MAGA wing of the Republican Party that is selecting him as their gubernatorial nominee. There was a last-minute effort to try and get some of the other candidates to drop out, to consolidate the rest of the field, to create that one-on-one race that Michael Smerconish was just talking about. But it was too little too late. And in many ways, it actually echoed the primary in 2016, when Donald Trump knocked out candidate after candidate and more moderates in the field couldn't consolidate.
What do you think his message needs to be tonight in his remarks?
Well, we're used to candidates who try and move toward the center once they win a nomination. I don't think that's about to happen. Let's watch.
Yeah, he's going to be speaking shortly. We'll hear what he has to say. He's the projected Republican winner. He's obviously a very, very happy guy. We did get a statement about Mastriano from Josh Shapiro, the Democratic candidate, the Attorney General of Pennsylvania. He said Pennsylvania needs a governor who can meet this moment, but Republicans just nominated a dangerous extremist who wants to take away our freedoms The contrast in this election could not be clearer. Doug Mastriano wants to ban abortion without exceptions, restrict the right to vote, and spread conspiracy theories, and destroy the union way of life for hardworking Pennsylvanians. Anderson, very strong statement from Josh Shapiro attacking Doug Mastriano.
Yeah, I want to talk with our team here about David Urban. What did you say a Mastriano-Shapiro race looked like to you?
Listen, again, I'm for the most conservative guy that could win in the state of Pennsylvania, and I just think it's tough. Josh Shapiro is an incredibly competent candidate, and I think Mastriano. Listen, Pennsylvania is a historically kind of purple state, right? And so I don't think my opinion may not make a lot of Republicans happy to hear, but I'm just being truthful. This is we're hearing this, the governor gets to appoint the Secretary of State. The governor has a big role what's going to happen in 2024. I want the Republican nominee to win in Pennsylvania in this race. I just think it's pushing a big rock up a hill for Doug Mastriano with the views he's espoused, with what he's saying now, where he was on January 6th, just a little bit out of step with where Pennsylvania Republican voters have traditionally been. If you look at folks like Pat Toomey and Tom Ridge and Arlen Specter, it's a long history going back many years. Thornburg, a very moderate Republican in the state.
But why don't you have Toomey now? You don't have Toomey now because Toomey voted to convict Trump for his role. And he knew that the base of his party was going to punish him for doing the right thing.
He also made a term limits commitment.
Well, sure. That's fine, but I also think the fact that he was one of the few Republican senators that stood up, did the right thing, said the president can't be sicking mobs on the Capitol in the middle of a ceremony, and now he's gone. And look at the replacement. This you can't get away from that. Look at the replacement. Now, obviously, Josh Shapiro is an extraordinary human being, not just an extraordinary politician. He is an extraordinary human being, and I think he's going to represent the state well. But Democrats can't take it for granted.
These races are very tough. We shouldn't make it tougher on ourselves.
Well, and I'd say this, what's interesting, in the last few minutes, the Republican Governors Association, very powerful Republican effort, came out with a statement that was short of an endorsement of Mastriano. So that's interesting. When the RGA is even saying, we're going to play in winnable races, but they didn't quite endorse him. And of course, Donald Trump didn't even win Pennsylvania. So running almost more extreme than Trump is not a winning recipe for a general election.
Listen, Doug Mastriano may surprise everybody and come back to the middle here, right? I hope he does.
It's hard to see him coming back to a middle.
You're going to have to come back to the middle, right? There's a long history in primaries. People run to the left, they run to the right, and then they kind of tack back towards the middle.
How do you defend being on January 6th?
Listen, that's where he needs to be to win. That's where he needs to be. If he wants to be competitive against Josh Shapiro in the fall, he needs to tack back to the middle and try to win some.
I will say this: no matter whether he attacks left, right, or otherwise, Democrats have to take this very seriously. It's too dangerous.
Let's listen into Doug Mastriano.
God is good, and all the time. Any freedom-loving Americans in the house here? Wow, 1 Corinthians 1:27 gives us all hope. God uses the foolish to confound the wise, and the weak to confound the strong, right? That's his story, and he uses people like you and me to change history. I always like to say when we make his story our story, we can change history. But it's been a time to try our souls. I'm looking across the past couple years here, and I'm looking at some other champions out here that fought with us. And you remember when the schools shut down and they mashed up your kids, deprived your kids of athletic opportunities, scholarships, of their education, of their prom, of life, masking them up for no scientific reason to do that. Remember your businesses, essential, non-essential, not essential? Not in my Pennsylvania, what do you say? Absolutely not. It was a dark time in Levine, follow the science. Only a Democrat can get away with failed policies of sending the sick in their homes, killing thousands, and get away with it. And their darling, of course, would be promoted to Admiral, Woman of the Year. Anyway. But They like to call people who stand on the Constitution far right and extreme. I repudiate that. That is crap. That is absolutely not true. Actually, their party, which the media stands for and advocates for, they've gone extreme. They're the ones that sent the sick back in their homes, their policies, Democrat policies, and killed so many. That's extreme. That's extreme, forcing your kids to mask up. That's extreme, forcing healthcare workers to lose their job for not getting a jab. It's extreme when you shut down half of the small businesses in our state and put people out of their life. That's extreme. Our view for Pennsylvania is one of hope and freedom, that people come here and walk as they see fit, not as some governor or some media hack sees fit. That's right. We're going to restore the dream to Pennsylvania, a place where you want to come and live. We're going to be the most prosperous state in the nation. We're going to open up our energy sector like you've never seen it before. Yep. We're going to go from number 3 in the nation, energy producer, to number 1. That's going to bring jobs here, life here, prosperity here. It's going to be a marvel to watch. You know, Josh Shapiro is backed by dark money, by unions, by corruption. They think they could win this by throwing $20 and $30 million around. But the people of Pennsylvania, we're no longer asleep, and we do not consent. We saw in our own race here, one guy had like $16 million, right? It's like single digits. I mean, you cannot buy elections anymore. Maybe that was true before COVID, but our eyes are wide open. I know as we travel the state here, we have a massive movement of people from the width and length of Pennsylvania who don't always agree with us on all issues. In fact, many of them used to be Democrats and recently switched so they could vote for us here, and it's fantastic. John Adams said, our second president, facts are stubborn things, right? And as you are out collecting, you've got to keep an eye on that phone there, sorry. As you're out there collecting a record number for a Republican gubernatorial candidate, 29,000 signatures get me on the ballot. You converted it was beautiful. Thank you for doing that. That's when the swamps are like, uh-oh, maybe we should not discount this movement. You converted thousands of Democrats in this movement here. Their party has left them behind. We're going to work, Rebbe and I, together with you, we had the hardest working campaign in this primary. We're going to have the hardest working campaign in this general election. Anyone watch our bus tour last week? Anyone paying attention saw that several of our stops were in traditional Democrat strongholds, like Pittsburgh and Erie. Downtown Erie, we had 500 people come to our event. I mean, it's fantastic. This is infectious here because we all love freedom. Everyone wants to walk and live as free men and women, right? I know you do. Come on. So our number one goal is to restore freedom, right? So on day one, any mandates are gone. Yep. On day one, any jab for job requirements are gone. On day one, I'll be happy to reinstate any National Guard member or Air Guard member that was kicked out because of the jab for job requirement. Yep. On day one, school transparency will be ordered. I mean, there's so much here. On day one, CRT's over.
All right, State Senator Doug Mastriano declaring victory in his Republican primary to be the next governor candidate from the Republican Party in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He'll be facing off against the current Attorney General, Democrat Josh Shapiro. Josh Shapiro currently has COVID and is not going to be coming out to speak. He is at home and will not be speaking this evening because of that. But let me bring in Dana and Abby because what we saw there was just a little glimpse of the policies and the persona that have so many Republicans in Pennsylvania and in Washington, D.C., concerned that Mastriano is going to be too extreme to win in a purple state like Pennsylvania this fall. You heard him talking about COVID policies and also against critical race theory, but something else you heard at the very beginning was a religious invocation. Mastriano is part of what has been called a Christian nationalist movement, which is the belief that God intended the United States to be a Christian country. That is one of the forces that converged on the Capitol on January 6, 2021, where Mastriano was as well. That was part of the insurrection. And it is one of the reasons why, as you heard earlier with Dave Urban and Alyssa Farah, both of them Republicans, there was so much worry, Dana, that Mastriano will not be able to win in November, although, honestly, who knows?
I mean, just starting where you left off there, Jake, one of the many, many clear contrasts, you talked about his belief that America is a Christian nation. He's going to be running against a Jewish candidate. So, I mean, that on its face is going to be a very interesting dynamic. Also, it wasn't just that Mastriano was talking about COVID and about the policies that were in place in Pennsylvania. He specifically singled out Dr. Rachel Levine, who was the leader of the health service there in Pennsylvania and is now on a national level, was a very high-ranking four-star officer in the public health service who is transgender. And so what Michael Smerconish said that he was glad about was that we were going to see and hear Mastriano after spending a while on the campaign trail shutting out the press. What David Urban, another one of our brethren from Pennsylvania, was hoping that maybe he would signal a bit more of a shift towards the middle.
Yeah.
That's pretty clear it's not going to happen.
The pivot is the problem, or the lack thereof. I think Republicans, the key to making this shift from a primary to a general election successfully in a purple state like Pennsylvania, a swing state, is that you're able to win the primary, emerge from it largely unscathed, and then make the pivot to a general election. And he didn't do that tonight. I mean, that speech was the same speech that he would have given in the primary and that he has given. And you're not talking about inflation, which is the Democrats' weakest issues. You're not talking about a lot of the core things that I think Republicans think will be most potent. Instead, it's all of the same things. You know, maybe it's abortion, but it's really the election. It's COVID denialism, anti-vaccine politics, all of that, CRT, you name it.
Things I think that we need to also understand when it comes to Mr. Mastriano, State Senator Mastriano, is that he does not believe that he is just running a campaign. He believes he is quite literally on a crusade, and his opponents are not just opponents, they are evil, which is an important thing that is going to be part of the debate and discussion as voters decide who they want to lead the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in November. We are right now waiting to learn the winner of the marquee Republican Senate race in Pennsylvania and to find out how North Carolina Congressman Madison Cawthorn fares tonight. He is trailing with most of the votes in. Not all of them, but most of them. We got a lot more ahead, a lot more nail-biting after the break. It is election night in America, and we are bringing you now two key race alerts. Let's go now to the Republican Senate primary in Pennsylvania. Former hedge fund manager Dave McCormick still in the lead, much more narrow now, 31.8%. He is about 7,000 votes ahead of Mehmet Oz, the television doctor endorsed by Donald Trump, who's at 30.9%, a real squeaker there. Kathy Barnett, who is an insurgent and has been surging recently, is still in third place with 23.5% of the vote. Still, 48% of the vote remains to be counted, so it's anybody's race as of now. But right now, Dave McCormick remains in the lead. Let's go to the North Carolina House race, where incumbent Congressman Madison Cawthorn remains in second place with 31.7% of the vote. In first place, State Senator Chuck Edwards with 33.5% of the vote. He's up by 1,500 votes, more than 1,500 votes. Let's go to Diane Gallagher right now, who is at Cawthorn headquarters in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Diane, what's happening inside the Cawthorn camp right now. Most of the votes are counted, but there's still 5 or 6% of the vote out there. What is the campaign saying?
Yeah, so things are shutting down here at this point, Jake. Madison Cawthorn went home just a few moments ago after addressing supporters and telling them that he plans to fight on for his community. Now, what that means for him is still to be determined. As you said, still some votes out there at this point, but it has been an uphill battle for him all night. This is what he said to supporters just a few moments ago.
You know what? The thing that I love about President Trump is that when you get your back pushed up against the wall, I've found that most people in politics, if it's not politically expedient to them, they'll turn your back on you in a heartbeat. But no matter what you are facing, when Donald Trump has your back, he has your back to the end.
Can I report the concession or not? So again, Madison Cawthorn had this lead that he anticipated coming into this, but of course we know about all of those scandals that have plagued him throughout his very short tenure during this freshman year in Congress. He also was up against plenty of cash and pressure from Republicans in his state, including U.S. Senator Thom Tillis. And I am being told now by the spokesperson for the campaign that Madison Cawthorn has called Chuck Edwards and conceded the race to him, Jake. So Madison Cawthorn will be a one-term congressman, it appears. He has called State Senator Chuck Edwards and conceded that race. Edwards, of course, had the support of most of the major politicians and Republicans here in the state of North Carolina, including U.S. Senator Thom Tillis, who put quite a bit of effort into actively campaigning for him. Edwards told me when I spoke with him about this race that he considers himself just as conservative, just as Trump aligned, just less embarrassing. He said that he plans to be more present within the district than he said Cawthorn was, and that he planned to just get to work and not chase the limelight. Those were his accusations against Cawthorn, the reasons why he said that he felt like he should stay in the race. One more thing here, Jake. I don't think, and according to Chuck Edwards, he would have even been in this race to start with if Madison Cawthorn had not switched districts when the redistricting process went through North Carolina and went to a different district closer to Charlotte. There were a lot of people here who said they felt abandoned by that because when the court struck down that map and they were redrawn, he came back to his old district that had a much larger field of Republicans who thought they were vying for an open seat. Chuck Edwards told me he didn't think he was going to ever go up against an incumbent because he was a good Republican. But he said at that point, too much had happened and he wanted to stay in the race because of that sort of abandonment that he took it for his home in his district. But Madison Cawthorn, Jake, conceding that race tonight to State Senator Chuck Edwards, who will likely be the Republican nominee for the 11th District of North Carolina.
All right, Diane Gallagher, a fascinating turn of events in the 11th Congressional District in North Carolina. Congressman Madison Cawthorn defeated in the Republican primary and conceding defeat to the state senator, Mr. Edwards, who defeated him. Let's go to Dana and Abby. Dana and Abby, I think it's fair to say that this victory would not have happened for State Senator Edwards if Senator Thom Tillis, who is an incumbent Republican senator, had not pushed for Edwards to run, supported Edwards to run, publicly come out against the embarrassments, the scandals, too many to list, really, in the evening we have together, that the Madison Cawthorn has brought in just a few years, just 2 years in Congress. And I saw a Republican commentator, conservative commentator, saying on social media earlier that that is what the Republican Party needs, that kind of leadership that Senator Tillis demonstrated, which is this is somebody who is not good for the Republican Party, not good for the citizens of the 11th Congressional District, in Senator Tillis's view. I'm going to do something to change it.
Yeah, but you know, Jake and Abby, that the kind of statement that Senator Tillis made about Madison Cawthorn would have been complete unanimity among every Republican, loud and clear, just a few years ago, to the point where Madison Cawthorn would probably have been completely run out of town, would not have felt that he even could stay on the ballot. He had the endorsement, tepid as it was, he had the endorsement of Donald Trump. This is a man who has a cauldron of crazy, of things that he has done, where he has one after another incident where it has to do with a gun at the airport, orgies, drugs. I mean, you name it, he has done it, to the point where I believe it was Richard Burr, the retiring senator, said that he is so embarrassing that it's just a day that ends with Y.
Right.
He's embarrassing the Republicans of North Carolina and the United States Congress.
And
this is a Republican.
Yeah, I mean, both of the, really, Madison Cawthorn had very few friends. He made it very easy for Republicans to kind of unite against him. And you know that that there was unity against him because in the run-up to this race, pretty much everything that you can think of that was negative about Cawthorn came out. There were photos of him in women's lingerie. There were videos of him doing, seemingly sexually explicit things. He had to explain away all of those things, but it was just evidence of the force that was being put toward getting him out of this race. He was outspent significantly, and Tom Tillis put his money where his mouth was. He spent from his super PAC. There's a reason, though, that this is not going to happen when it comes to other issues among Republicans. People like Tom Tillis, they could get Madison Cawthorn out. He's a 20-something-year-old new member of Congress who made a lot of mistakes. As it goes, that's one of the easier things to kind of put your foot down on. I don't think you're going to see this kind of effort being made on other issues. Republicans are not necessarily going to go up against, Marjorie Taylor Greene or others who kind of are in the same vein. They are all show in a lot of ways, all about the media, all about the tweets and the retweets, but they're not going to go up against those individuals because I think it's a very different dynamic. Madison Cawthorn just made it really easy for them.
Yeah, one of the things I think it's worth pointing out, Anderson, is that what appeared to be the final straw for Republicans in the Senate and in North Carolina and in the House when it came to Congressman Madison Cawthorn was not his election lies or his support of the insurrection or his various run-ins with the law, the allegations of sexual misconduct in college, and on and on. It appeared to be when he went on a podcast and said that Republicans in Washington, D.C. Did drugs and had orgies. That is what appears to have been his biggest mistake, was impugning them, not any of the other things he did that actually physically harmed other people.
Right, and that's absolutely right. And then he tried to kind of walk that back somewhat, or at least we're told he did with McCarthy. What do you think happens to Madison Cawthorn now?
I doubt he goes away. I'm sure he'll become a fixture in some of the far right-wing media. But one thing I want to note, perhaps the most honorable thing Madison Cawthorn did in office was tonight to call and concede. I was actually surprised to hear that he so quickly went ahead and actually made that concession because he was such a booster of the big lie and the election was stolen. But one thing I think that is important to note in his case, he had obviously his plethora of scandals. He was on the bad side of Republican leadership. But all politics is local. I worked in North Carolina's 11th district for years. His district office was closed most of the time. He wasn't doing casework. He wasn't doing constituent services. And this is a district that's heavily veterans, retired folks, senior citizens who need help with basic things like navigating the bureaucracy of Medicare or veterans benefits. So he wasn't doing the real work of being a congressman. And then on top of that was an embarrassment. So I think it's a good day for the people of North Carolina's 11th district.
Do you think he bought in? I mean, once he sort of got, not that the lights of Washington are particularly bright, but that it kind of went to his head? I mean, if you forget about your district, you forget about the people who got you there.
Oh, exactly. And he was co-opted quickly by the Matt Gaetzes and the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, and I think saw it as more of a way to become a right-wing celebrity rather than to actually serve his constituents.
I would also add that Madison Cawthorn's a kid, right? Let's not forget he's a very, very young guy, and a lot of people make mistakes when they're young that they regret later in life. So I'm sure you haven't seen the last of Madison Cawthorn. He'll be back in some other form. And so don't write him off yet.
Hopefully we'll see less of Madison Cawthorn than we have.
Well, you may see more because he is now a right-wing celebrity. And by the way, with everything you just said about him, he still came in number 2. He still came in number 2. Who voted for this?
He's still,
so that's I mean, come on.
But that's my point. He's a popular guy. Don't write him off yet.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that I was going to be very, very concerned if you could do the kinds of stuff he did, tell the kinds of lies he told, and be rewarded for it. I think it's good that he gets a chance to maybe go home and get himself back together. You've not heard the last of him, but he needs to take a break. He needs to get some help, and they actually need to have some good government down there in North Carolina.
President Trump asked voters to give him a second chance.
Well,
yeah. I listen again. That's my point. I think he's a young guy, right? He's going to be around. North Carolina is a big state. And don't count him out running again in something else in the state of North Carolina.
But listen, it is a notable loss for the former president. It was a last-minute endorsement, but North Carolina's 11th district, R+9 at least, if not more Republican than that. President Trump won it. So that didn't put him over the edge shows that perhaps his support is waning there as well.
Well, what I will say is that, Trump, there are times he can be loyal, and there are times he's not. There are people who have really thrown themselves, like think about Mike Pence, people who have thrown themselves on hand grenades for the guy, who he completely threw under the bus, and yet he picks this young man who clearly needs help to be loyal to. So I think sometimes, I don't understand the rationale.
Lou Barletta in Pennsylvania, who was an early supporter of Donald Trump's and then didn't get his endorsement.
Yeah, so I don't understand the rationale.
The spotlight is on the Republican Senate race in Pennsylvania. It is still up in the air with more than half of the votes in. Will we be able to make a projection anytime soon? We'll find out ahead.
It's election night in America. Let's take a look at another key race alert. Look at this nail-biter in the Senate Republican primary in Pennsylvania. Former hedge fund manager Dave McCormick still in the lead with 32% of the vote. He is 7,388 votes ahead of Mehmet Oz, the TV doctor endorsed by Donald Trump, who's at 31.1%. Kathy Barnett, who was surging late in the race, is at 23.7%. That's with 63% of the estimated vote in. Still a lot of votes to be counted. Let's go to John King at the Magic Wall. And John, what is going on here? Because first of all, obviously, the Barnett surge is, at least as of now, has not brought her to the competitive race we thought she was at. Where are the votes coming in from?
It could be the case, Jake, as we continue to count. Maybe she peaked too soon, because we do know both McCormick and Oz turned on her late in the campaign when they realized she was a threat. But where are we? We're at 63% estimated of the vote counted. So we still have a ways to go, a little more than a third of the vote to count. But you see all this deep red. That is Dave McCormick leading in a lot of counties that Donald Trump carried in both 2016 and 2020. And that's the surprise of the race so far. You see the lead, 7,416 votes. It's gone from about 6,000 up to about 8,000, 8,500 in the last hour or so as more and more votes come in. I just want to walk through some of it as you show. Number one, what's missing, right? What votes are still not been counted? So we're at about 64% statewide. Forgive me for coming across here. I just want to move this back. Let's move it back to about 72%, 73%. So these counties have reported 73% or less of the vote, meaning there's more votes to be counted. If you look at them, Jake, a lot of them are over here. Right? This is the more populous part of the state, over in the eastern part of the state, especially down here in the suburbs just around Philadelphia. So a lot of the votes to be counted still out here. You do see some counties out here. Besides Erie County, most of the counties you're seeing out here in the west have a very small population, so not a ton of votes out there. Let me bring this back to the full map so we can just come through and count as we go. What else do you see in this map? The reason McCormick is so competitive right now is because he's doing well everywhere. Now, you see, this is Oz color's pink, this is Barnett's color, the yellow, and the deeper red is Dave McCormick. What do I mean by he's doing well everywhere? Well, let's take a look at Trump counties, the counties Trump won in 2020. Right? You see, the gray ones are anything dark gray that was carried by Joe Biden. You see the dark gray here, the dark gray here. But in these counties Trump carried, look at Dave McCormick. He's more than holding his own right there. That's one way to look at it. Here's another way to look at it. Let's come up through here and look at rural counties. That is Donald Trump's strength in all of these big states. Rural America was the backbone of Trump's support. Look at Dave McCormick. He's the dark red. He's doing well in a lot of these rural counties as well. This was where people thought, would the Trump endorsement, a few votes here, a few votes there, make a difference? Right now, David McCormick holding his own when you look at the rural counties. Let's take a look. Another place to come at it, the suburban counties, especially, wait till this slides away, but in western Pennsylvania, Allegheny County, the suburbs around Pittsburgh, Dave McCormick leading there. When you come here, more of a split verdict. Barnett is doing well in Montgomery County here, but again, everywhere you look, Dave McCormick holding his own in the suburbs, in the rural part of the state. That doesn't mean we're done. We still have a ways to go, but a surprisingly strong in Trump country, strong in what you'd say traditional Republican country, strong in the East, strong in the West. And you see this. Remember Butler County? We talked about Butler County a lot in 2020. Trump had a big rally here late in the campaign. This is where he thought he would come back. He lost to Joe Biden in Pennsylvania, but this is where he thought he would come back. This was a huge Trump county. You're seeing this a lot in what you would call Trump country Pennsylvania. McCormick on top, and then add this up, 30%, 23%, right? 53, 54%. That's one in Butler County. You move over here to Clarion County, same thing. Dave McCormick leading in this county. It's a smaller county. You see the population here. But again, you add up the other two candidates here. Barnett is second and Oz is third. You're seeing this in a lot of the strong Trump rural counties. McCormick leading, the other two second or third, flipping back and forth, but splitting the vote. And again, you pull it back out, we're at 66%. So 2/3 of the vote counted in Pennsylvania. It's down to 6,473 right now. That's not a huge lead, but it has held up for some time, Jake, as we continue to fill in the map.
Yeah, I have another question about the Senate race before we go to the governor's race, because Dr. Oz, he's still in a very close second place.
Yes, he is.
And with so many votes remaining to be counted, who knows what's going to happen. He obviously is the Trump-endorsed candidate. Your argument about McCormick, how he's been able to get to the successful place he's in right this minute, and that all could change, so I don't want anyone to think that it couldn't. What about Dr. Oz? Tell us where he has done well and where he should have been doing better, in your view.
So let's look at it that way as you come through. So you want to look at the Trump counties, the 2020 Trump counties where Oz is winning. Well, he's doing okay. You see the pink Oz here. He's doing okay in some of the Trump counties, just not as many, right? These are the counties won by Donald Trump. So Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz, has Donald Trump's endorsement, and you see him. He's winning some of them here, but he's not winning. Certainly a plurality to Dave McCormick right now. So it hasn't been automatic. In part, that's because of Barnett's strength, even in places where McCormick is winning. So let's try to take a few other places to look at this. This is the full place. One place where Oz is doing well is in Philadelphia. Now, again, Philadelphia is a Democratic bastion. There are not a ton of Republicans there, but it is a major population center. And if you look right now, 67% of the vote. So again, this is both a blessing and a curse for Dr. Oz. There are more votes to be counted here in a Democratic city still, but they're up to 67%. So you pull back out. This is the biggest surprise here. His headquarters, Dr. Oz's headquarters, is in Bucks County tonight. He's getting 24% of the vote there. Dave McCormick getting 32% of the vote there. Again, Jake, this is where the people live, right? 30% of the population is right here. In Montgomery County, Oz is running third. In Chester County, Oz is running not too far distant, but second. So that's what you're looking at. In part, if you want to say the Trump-like or the mega vote with the endorsement and then Barnett's positions, they're splitting the vote in a lot of places. And McCormick, who in this race, I guess you would call the more mainstream Republican, right now, 31.7 to 31.2. We got some math to do still.
Yeah.
Down to 5,000 now, down to 5,100 now, excuse me.
What's interesting is, and again, the vote's not over, we're not done counting, but it does appear, if this were to hold, it's possible that Barnett is the one who prevented Oz from passing Dave McCormick. Because McCormick and Oz were in a real dogfight, and then Barnett had her surge. It's possible, because she is more Trumpy in so many ways, took some of the Trump votes away from Oz. I'm just hypothesizing here.
Well, I do think, without a doubt, again, I just pick one of these counties out here in western Pennsylvania randomly. You just see it again, 36%, and you look at the two of these candidates here, 32 and 23, right? So you're 55 right there. This is, I'm not even sure what these numbers are going to show. I'm just going back to 2020 right here. This is a 70%, 68% Trump county. So if there was an automatic transfer with the endorsement to the Senate candidate, you would see Oz doing well here, and simply they are splitting, if you will, the more MAGA vote, call it what you will. I'm not sure what the right words are anymore. Dave McCormick, again, in many of these counties, he's leading right now. And again, we're up to 68% of the vote, 5,126 votes. Go back through our last couple election cycles. Pennsylvania is always close, whether we're talking about competitive primaries or competitive general elections. So more math to do, but this is a map that if you're in McCormick headquarters, you are impressed by your strength here, but especially your strength out here in the rural parts.
Yeah, although we do need to underline there's still more than 30% of the vote to count, and McCormick right now is only up by 0.5%, half a percentage point. So it really, anything could happen. Let's look at the governor's race if we can, because I think a lot of people, we're talking about how close the race for Senate is. It was not particularly close in the gubernatorial primary on the Republican side. For Mastriano, he really ran away with it.
And again, so if you're in McCormick headquarters, if you're in any of the Republican Senate headquarters, you're saying, why didn't the Trump endorsement do for Oz what it did for Mastriano? Now, Mastriano, obviously, the state senator, he has a more history in the state. Part of the criticism of Oz, part of the criticism of McCormick as well, is that they were relative newcomers or returning to Pennsylvania, if you will. But look at the scope of the win here, right? Look at the scope of the win. But in the conversation Abby and Dana were having, that David Urban was having earlier about why do people view Mastriano as such a weak, potentially weak general election candidate, well, this is Trump country. Come east. This is Lou Barletta's home base, right? Before Lou Barletta went to Congress, he was the mayor, Luzerne County. He was the mayor of Hazleton. So Lou Barletta, it's not surprising that he did well here. This was his traditional base. He's very well known from his days as mayor and his days in Congress. But look down here. Look down here. Again, a Republican candidate does not have to win the Philadelphia suburbs to win statewide in Pennsylvania, but the Republican candidate has to be competitive in the Philadelphia suburbs. He cannot get blown out like Donald Trump did with Joe Biden. So if you come in here and look, Jake, this is Bill McSwain running first, Mastriano running third in Montgomery County. You move over to Bucks County here, Mastriano winning, but narrowly. So he will say, oh, he's competitive at least here, but just narrowly. But in these other suburban counties, he's third here. He's actually second here in Chester County. And you move here to Delaware County, he is third again. So if you look at it there, if you're the Republican candidate in November, you have to be more competitive in the Philadelphia suburbs. Doesn't mean between now and then he can't make himself more competitive, but if you're a Republican looking at this map tonight, or if you're the Shapiro campaign on the Democratic side looking at this map tonight, you know, again, 30% of the state population lives right here in this southeastern corner of the state. Doug Mastriano, as of tonight, is very weak in that part of the state. That is a giant challenge, which is why a lot of Republicans think that in terms of the governor's race here, lean at D, we go on from here.
Yeah, although as we've discussed earlier, Trump's endorsement of Mastriano came very late. It was him trying to get a W. He's been really on the Oz train for a long, long time. He just recently endorsed Mastriano, sensing that he was going to win, as we saw that he did. We're seeing more results come in from Pennsylvania and the GOP Senate race that still remains undecided this hour. Just a narrow margin between McCormick and Oz right now. We're also counting down to the next round of primary results out west, including a significant test of President Biden's political clout and a rare endorsement in a primary. We're back in a moment. Stay with us.